Good morning. I now call the August 15th, 2019 work session of the Marion County School Board to order at 9 a.m. Please silence your electronic devices to avoid disturbing others. I now ask the school board attorney to explain the rules for this school board meeting.
Good morning. This work session is a public meeting as defined in Florida Sunshine Law. The board is dedicated to full transparency in its meetings and its work. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board has adopted uniform meeting procedures, including the right for citizens to participate. The board will allow public comment regarding any work session item listed on today's agenda at the appropriate time. Speakers must fill out a request form and hand it to the school board secretary. After the board and superintendent have completed their discussion on a particular agenda item, the secretary will call speakers' names in the order received. At the podium, speakers are asked to state their full name and address and to spell their last names. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. As required by the Sunshine Law, the board must maintain orderly conduct and proper decorum throughout this meeting. Speakers may criticize subject matter and decisions in a respectful manner, but not people. Finally, speakers must be very careful not to violate the privacy rights of others, especially students and their family members, by mentioning their names or other identifying information. Thank you for your attention to these rules.
Thank you. We will now begin our work session with the superintendent's administrative briefing.
Good morning. We just had a board meeting Tuesday, and so I was able to share all of the first day statistics with you. And so just on that happy note, we finished up our first day visits, and we continued those. Nothing of note since Tuesday. We will have our final alternate chosen for our ICROC in probably just a few minutes, and then Elena is ready with the letters to go out to the folks who are chosen as well as the alternates. The first meeting will be September 3rd, and we'll have an organizational meeting. Ms. Austin Ellis and I will facilitate that Tuesday, September 3rd at 5:30. We'll then we'll do an overview of the Sunshine with Mr. Gibbs. We'll facilitate them electing their officers. We'll take a brief recess, then come back, and then the group will convene their first meeting, and we'll go from there. So that information will be going out late today, right? We'll finish that up late today, Elena? So we'll send the letters in the post, and then we'll also scan and email them so they have immediate notification for that, and that gives us enough time also to advertise it. So that'll all be taken care of today, so we're excited for that. And at this point, that's all we have. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm taking notice of the order of this work session today. At the last work session, I requested that the budget go first with Miss Boston Ellis, because that's pretty important information. And I notice on this plan, we had the capital fund with Mr. Robert Knight. Ms. Boston Ellis, is it okay if we put you first, or do you need some time? Okay. Okay, good. I'm going to...
See, in our thinking, though, Madam Chair, is that his information would lead into what you would, when you're thinking about the budget, he prefaces that. That was our way of thinking by asking him to go first. Like, if you know the long-term plan of, oh, we're going to do this, then that helps with when you're deciding where your priorities are with budget and things.
Okay.
That information would help Ms. King.
Okay, okay, and that's good to know now. I probably would have appreciated maybe some explanation before the board meeting, especially when it was requested. Okay, so we will move forward with Mr. Robert Knight then, the capital fund, 5-year work plan, and then the budget.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Dr. Mayor, Mrs. Martinez Lopez, and Mr. Gibbs. Pleasure to speak to you this morning about the 5-year district facilities work program. I actually have 2 PowerPoints. One is the work program itself, and the other is an update on the district administration, MTI repurposing and consolidation, because it is part of this 5-year work program, but it's in-depth enough that it warranted a separate presentation within the confines of the work program. So I'll begin that after I complete the work program talk. We can obviously either pause for public comment, or I can lead right into it and have public comment after. So last month I came and talked to the school board about mostly the program funding and the projects themselves. I will give you an overview of what we talked about last month, and with the primary focus this month on student stations and what, if anything, we need to do with them or be aware of so that the board has a chance to react. So last month, the overview is that our millage funding has increased by an average about $2 million a year over last year's projections. However, our debt has also increased by almost the same amount, mostly due to bus purchases and other things we've done as a district. So it's kind of a wash. Our rollover projects have been adjusted this month to reflect the very latest numbers because back in July, we hadn't received all of the billings for June. What that really means is that your rollover balance from 1819 and 1920 shrinks a bit as you pay those bills off because they're in previous years, so your rollover amount rolling into the next year is always a little bit lower once you get through your June payments. The budget includes new cafeterias, some of the bigger highlight projects for this year for North Marion High School, Osceola Middle, air conditioning work at 3 different elementary schools and a middle school. We have air conditioning replacements at Dunellen High and new art music rooms planned in the future, as well as some minor remodeling at several different schools in the district. It includes roof replacements and eventually a new cafeteria at Wymena Park, all part of the 5-year work program in terms of funding. So I'll go through the revenue source real quick with you, and for the most part, it's unchanged except the unrestricted, or excuse me, the unrestricted fund balance has changed a little bit, that second number in red, because as I noted just a few moments ago, as we pay bills off in July from June, your rollover amount shrinks a bit because those are in the arrears in the previous year. But not surprisingly, there is still blanks there for PICO new construction and maintenance. We didn't get any Christmas presents or anything that came to our doorstep saying, hey, we found money in the state level. So the state level funding contribution remains just the CO and DS bond sale. You couple that with our millage revenues, which are just over $30 million. Then you deduct out those other expenses for buses, vehicles, our maintenance transfer, our property insurance, our debt payment. And I did leave in there, because we didn't talk about it heavily last time, debt proposal if a new MTI were to be built. So it's pre-factored in this figure. And then that gives us at the bottom of the page the available revenue. So this year, adding our restricted fund balance and unrestricted fund balance, we have $28,210,295 to work with. A little over $19 million that is already spoken for because those are the projects from last year moving into this year that we haven't finished or started, such as the cafeterias or Dunellen High School. So it only changed by a few $100,000, and most of that, actually all of that, was the rollovers changing as we paid bills off. That's really the only change in this 5-year work program as far as the projected funding. So we'll move quickly to the next page of maintenance. There is only one change here, and that is we took $100,000 out of the Bellevue Santos air handler replacement project because we felt we had more than enough to cover the cost of that project, and we did create a new project that's, I believe, on the next page for generators, and it's only $100,000, and it's to allow us the opportunity to pay for design at Forest High School. We currently have a grant that purchased 3 generators, but no money to put them in anywhere. And we're hopeful that this $100,000 will at least allow us to set them on a campus and pay for the design. Forest High is one of the school sites slated to get a permanent generator instead of one that's brought out there. The only other highlight on this page, aside from the large projects like Dunellen High School Air, Evergreen, air conditioning upgrades, some of the future projects are additional upgrades at Dunellen Elementary, is remember the peach number, or the peach boxes indicate projects that are currently slated for district offices or the MTI campus. Obviously, that can change if the board decides to go in a different direction. And again, this is recap. The only change to the entire 5-year work program as far as numbers was the rollover budget changing and then moving that $100,000. That's it. Everything else is exactly what you saw last month. I'll flip to the next page to finish up the maintenance and repairs. And there is same things as you saw last month. We have electric transformers being replaced, air conditioning at Harborview Elementary, Howard Middle School, some work out at Northwest Transportation, some work at our compound, work at Vanguard High School a couple of years out, And again, some of those peach boxes, they indicate work that's currently slated for the MTI campus, again, unless that direction changes as far as where we go. So at the bottom, the numbers are unchanged as far as what we are funding, $24,179,907 this year. And the other ones, of course, in years 2 through 5 are projections. So we'll go into the next slot, and that's the capital outlay student stations. That is simply the remnants of the Waimea Park wing project. This is the last bills that'll come in. This whole line item will vaporize probably within 2 months for some final sidewalk work, the final bills for the fencing project, because the wing bills have already been paid. And then that'll wrap up this, and this will disappear altogether off the list. And so we'll go now to the non-student station capital outlay projects. This is exactly what you saw last month. We have a few district-wide projects. The biggest highlights on it really are 8th Street new music and art rooms in year 4. We do have, like we did last month, funds in there for district offices a couple of years out, and there is funding in the plan currently for purchasing property, and I'll cover that in much more detail in the second presentation, so we can really get into the nuts and bolts of what that really means. And there is funding there for Dunellen Middle School's covered walkways. Again, this is exactly what you saw last month. And I will go to the last page of the non-student station projects. And more of the same, there is one item in there for the MTI that's currently earmarked for MTI. And then we have the big North Marion High cafeteria construction. Just a footnote for that, I got verbal approval from the state to change our survey. It had said expand cafeteria, and I went and put together a spot survey for the state that told them we cannot physically expand it. So upon our board approving new, which we've all talked about doing, we need confirmation the state would have no issue. And they commented back that it's done exactly like they need to see it. There's no issue. Go ahead, get board approval and submit it so they can approve it. So in other words, there will be no issue from the state in amending our survey to show a new cafeteria at North Marion High School rather than an expansion, which is what was in our survey. The only other highlights on here are that some of the projects a few years out are art and music suite at Osceola Middle. We have something similar for that at Stanton Wearsdale. And then in year 5, we anticipate finally being able to build a cafeteria at Waimea Park, clean up some of the current cafeteria uses to other uses as we've done in the past, and maybe kind of finally put that one to rest. So that gives us a total overall of $93,258,373 worth of projects, including student station and non-student station. Of course, not all of those are funded, so we'll go to the summary page, and that summary page will show us what our overall picture looks like in the 5-year work program. So it'll be $117,438,280 worth of total needs / recommendations. We're funding just over $15 million of it in maintenance and repairs this year, just over $13 million of student station and non-student station projects, for a total of $28,210,295 funded this year. And overall, that means 18% over the next 5 years of the work program is funded. The other 82% is not. Not all those projects, of course, are dire, but obviously as they sit long enough, some of those become an issue. So I'll recap the entire 5-year work program when I'm done. I'm going to flip now, change gears to student stations and capacities. So the form you're going to see from the state in September looks drastically different than this presentation. The data is the same, but the state's form is much more cumbersome to read, decipher, and work through. So I've taken liberty to put everything onto one large spreadsheet so you can see everything in one shot. In what takes me 2 pages, it takes the state's form about 7 or 8 to say the same thing. So the bottom line of student stations is that they are broken down into brick and mortar seats versus portable seats. There's a distinction there because the state regards the lifespan of a school to be 50 years without any major overhauls, and it regards the lifespan of a portal to be only 20 years, which is why after year 20, they stop funding portable maintenance. It's all on our backs, so the longer we keep them, the longer it comes out of our pocket, not the state's. Student stations can only be added or deleted through a 5-year school plant survey or an amendment to it. Back in 2004 and in 2005, back-to-back years, we had 20% more kids in the district at the time than the state was projecting 5 years out. And we had to go back and tell the state, you've got to amend our numbers because we've got to build some schools to accommodate, and you're showing our growth way lower than it is today, and that's just not going to work. So we had to amend the school plant survey, and the state had to amend their numbers. But the only way you can add or delete seats is through board action on a survey request, and then the state has to concur. So we can't just build wings at will. It's the state's way of keeping tabs on what we do in the local district. The capacity of a school is related to the allowable percentage of stations that can be counted. At the elementary level, because students pretty much stay in their same classrooms all day long, they count 100% of the seats as your capacity. At middle school, high school, they transition every hour to a different classroom. Not everybody takes math at the same time. Not everybody has PE at the same time. So in middle school, they only let you count 90% of your seats as capacity. And at the high school level, it really depends on the number of student stations you have at the school, but they let you count on average 95%. MTI is the exception. Dunellen also falls into an exception because as you drop in student stations, they allow you a lower percentage that you can count those stations for actual seats. And our official full-time equivalency, FTE, comes from the state. So they have not released the official FTE numbers from 18-19 yet, so we had to guess. We had to do this last year and the year before. I don't imagine we're going to get them until the end of August, which is very, very close to when I've got to submit to you the 5-year plan. But they use those numbers as official numbers by school on what they count. What they do is they take a count in October and then again at the first of the year and at the end, and they average them. So we may show, well, we had 1,200 students at this school, but their average might come out to be 1,158. And we have to use their numbers, not our own, because they don't count kids that are not at a school-owned site. So the jail or DJJ, in other words, those students are not counted in the FTE count. The last thing in terms of an overview is the projections for the 5-year outlook is also from the state. And what we've seen over the years is as there's a boom, within a couple of years, all the projections go up. Then there's a slowdown, and in a couple of years, all the projections go down. And they stay in that trend until there's a major shift. So you could be a county experiencing large growth when the rest of the state isn't, and your projections are probably still going to be pointed downward, and that's where we had to amend our plan back-to-back years in the early 2000s because they had us going downward, and we already had more than 20% more students than they said we would have 5 years out. So with this overview, we'll go to the actual spreadsheet. I know it's kind of hard to read with the colors and the size of the font. I'll give you the lay of the land. On the far left, you have the location alphabetically of every school site we have. The next column is our 2019-20 brick and mortar stations as per the Florida Inventory of Schoolhouses. Next to it is our capacity. So for instance, Anthony Elementary has the same number because at elementary that you count 100% of your seats. And if you slide down to Bellevue Middle, the third school down, it's less because they only let you count 90% at the middle school, and the high school, again, they only let you count 95%. So the third column over in terms of actual numbers is our 1920 portable student stations. We may have portables at a school that are older than 20 years old, so they don't have seats attached. We can still use them as classrooms, provided they meet life safety codes and what have you, but the seats aren't counted, and that can be an advantage to us because we can show to the state, well, we don't have enough seats. You guys won't let us count a 35-year-old portable, so you give us the money, we'll build a wing and get rid of these. That's essentially what we did at Waimea Park Elementary is we had 3 portables out of 20 that had seats. We could show to the state, the school has been over capacity, it's not going to change, and we cannot go out there and provide a bunch of brand new portables. They have to be certain distances apart. We lose our ball fields. We built a wing, replaced them all, but I think 4. There's only 4 left there, and none of them has seats in them. So then you get to the overall student station column, the actual capacity, which is a combination of the brick and mortar capacity and the portable student station capacity. And then we have I have up there at the top, unofficial, because these numbers didn't come from the state. It's our interpolation. The state gave us our countywide, has not given us our by school numbers yet. And so next to that is the number of classrooms we have, portable and brick and mortar. Our average class size for 1920 projected based on this data, and our actual utilization projected based on this data. And then in 1920, it's our overall utilization of portable and brick and mortar. Then you get past the second orange column, and this is our projections. So over the next 5 years, the new student capacity would show a positive number if we're going to add seats to a school and a negative number if we're taking them away. All these numbers are portable numbers. We're projecting that if Anthony drops, we'll need those seats somewhere else. Right now, we've got them pegged at Pheasant and Elementary, and so on and so forth. The column next to that is the number of rooms to be added or taken away. So obviously, you move a portable, that shows up in that column. You add it somewhere else, it shows up as an add to that school. And then finally, that's the projected 2023-2024 capital outlay full-time equivalent. And again, these are based on the state giving us a flat projection for the county, and then we have to interpolate by school what we think that effect is going to be. So you get to the second to last column, and those are the utilization percentages. So yellow is where we've got 98% utilization or higher projected. If it's not colored or if it's the background color, it's not 98%. And then the darker blue is where we have 75% utilization and under. So this was a way to highlight what schools might be have more empty seats than others, and what schools may have more students projected than others. And again, that's what it would look like if we just moved portables to try to counter that. And then finally, in the very far right is our projected class size by school if we moved portables around to try to put them where we think the highest capacities are going to be. And then we will go to the second page of the student station capacity utilization, and you see that on the very bottom are the totals. Our overall brick and mortar seats come up to 47,651, but we're only allowed to count the capacity of 45,730. You add the student stations and portables to that, and we have a total capacity of 47,010 student stations in the district, and they are projecting that our enrollment's going to be 41,294. So on paper anyway, it looks like we've got plenty of seats to give. The problem is that some of those student station portables are probably taken up with a guidance suite because the school sold it never had one. Or it's PE being in there because they have no place to meet in the rain. Or it's a situation where you've got a school that's isolated, it's overcrowded, but it's 2 hours to get the kids to the empty schools. And so that's where we're kind of penalized by our geographics, and the state looks at numbers, and what they'll do is say, well, you don't appear to need any new construction, but lost in all that is the fact that some of our schools are 80 and 90 years old, and maybe the roof is dry and the walls are still standing, but the technology doesn't exist. And with no money in capital, it gets harder and harder to educate all students in all schools the exact same way. And so what that means is that there are a few hot spots where we have to be sensitive. Schools like Ward Highlands and Westport and Osceola Middle, some of those schools are traditionally right at capacity or slightly over, either A, because of demand, or B, because there's just really no more room to build anything. And some of those programs are popular, so everybody wants to get into those programs. So all we've done to solve any student station capacity issues is move portables around. It's not to say that this is exactly going to come true, that we'll be overcrowded in the future at certain schools, but certainly that seems to be the trend. And what we are being charged with in terms of a mission would be, is it good enough to last? Do we, in the future, add programs at other schools to disperse some of the interest to more than one school? Or do we start to take a hard look at, well, perhaps we should set up additional ESE zones? I know there was some moves in ESE recently, but all those little things factor into the big picture. And so what this chart is really supposed to show is that, well, we know we have seats, it's just unfortunate that not all of them are where we can put kids easily. If you have openings at North Marion High School, but Bellevue High is full, you got a domino effect of moving kids and student enrollment attendance lines before you can affect a school in the north. You just simply can't bus them from south of Bellevue all the way up to North Marion High. So that is an overview of our student station capacity. I would imagine that as time marches on, we'll be happy to get with whoever we need to, either Mr. Ayers' office or somewhere else, to help reinforce what the capacities are at these schools, and that in the past, we've seen sometimes affects programming at those schools in the future, because if you put all your programs at one school that are popular and everybody wants to go there, and then you have to start to deny folks just because you don't have the room. So beyond that, we'll go to the conclusion or / summary of the big picture of 5-year work program. All of our revenue that we're expected to get in the next 5 years is earmarked for something. There's nothing hanging around in the pockets as jingling change. They're all affiliated with a project. Our expected funding will cover about 18% of the total work program, and the revenue sources from the state are virtually non-existent. It amounts to just over $5 million over 5 years, and it's all capital outlay and debt service funds from bonds and things that they would sell on our behalf. So what that really means on the funding side is, looking ahead, it's advisable that we seek a new capital funding source. It's pretty clear, I think, that the state is not going to be a major player of funding for our local school district, simply because in the last 10 years we've gotten exactly nothing for construction, and for the first time in a while we've gotten zero for maintenance, and we're not projected to get any maintenance funds in the next 5 years. There is about $5 million or a little more than that in sales tax revenue from our previous sales tax efforts, but it is restricted that it can only be used for previous schools built under the sales tax or for something we have not yet built, but unfortunately $5 million will not build an entire school. It can, however, be used on some of the referendum-related properties that we had in the last, the last sales tax referendum. And then finally, if the projections hold true, the number of empty capacity seats will be 5,716 in 5 years. Some of those seats will shrink within 2 more years after this work program, because they'll be 20 years old and those seats will drop automatically. And then finally, redistricting or other program management might be something to consider in order to reduce overcrowding, simply because if you don't do anything but move portables, as you saw in that chart, there will be some schools that will be over the 100% capacity, and then we'll just simply have to decide that's okay because it's only one portable worth, or program might move by need anyway. So that's the conclusion of the 5-year district facilities work program overall piece. Certainly happy to answer any questions. Again, as a footnote, what you see in September to vote on will be the state's form. This data will not change. It will be in the state's form, but you might have a little trouble finding it, so you might want to keep this handy when you look it over. We have to submit by October 1st to the state. It's all electronic, and I don't even use the form the state uses as planning. I use this program just because it's very convoluted and spread out and very hard to tie these things in. But certainly once that gets on the board agenda, if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to me and I'll tell you where on this presentation that data was found. So I can either go into the next presentation or answer any questions on this one first, or I figured you did. I stand ready to answer them.
Okay, Mr.
Thank you for a very concise, depressing presentation.
All right. Had to be that way. I don't want to say that you get callous to these continual no funding issues, but I probably could hold up a sign from the last 10 years and it's unfortunately much the same.
Well, and that's where you've really provided me some food for thought, because when I hear zero for maintenance, and then I turn back to Article 9, Section 1 of our Florida Constitution, which I think we're supposed to be abiding by, it says very clearly, adequate provision shall be made by law for a uniform, efficient, safe, secure, and high-quality system of free public schools that allows students to obtain a high-quality education and for the establishment, and right here, maintenance and operation of institutions to be continued. So I'm not sure how what you're sharing with us is legal. And it's very frustrating and concerning to me to hear that without money and for capital improvements, we're not able to educate all students at all schools in the same way.
I think that's great to take to our legislators, and we need to send that to
But I
them.
have an answer for that, after y'all get done. Go ahead.
Well-
I agree with Ms. Thurlow.
I'd like to hear this answer.
Did I hear the answer?
We want to hear the answer.
Yeah, we want to hear the
Okay.
answer.
For many years, PICO dollars were funded by, remember, phone tax?
Yeah.
Okay?
Landline taxes.
So, where we have a problem, there has to be a solution. We have changed telephone systems.
Okay.
It is time to go to the legislature and say, you have not moved with the times. We still have telephones. We just have different telephones. Forward that tax forward to give us our PICO dollars back. And just tax it through, the people paid those taxes on their home phone lines for many, many years. Our PICO dollars were great. We no longer have landlines. We need to move the tax to the new phone system.
But we still have PICO dollars, right?
Not much.
And where are they
They
going?
haven't put
They're not even
anything in.
significant. They're not significant.
Where are PICO dollars?
The little PICO dollars that do get collected, this year, it's an anomaly. This year, they sent all those PICO dollars to charter schools. We got, the public school systems,
Charter schools
all
still
67 didn't get any.
But-
But normally, they go to the larger schools, because obviously if Marion County is a certain size, a Miami-Dade is much bigger. So if you say, well, your dole-out amounts to this dollar figure, well, for a large school district, it might be $1 million. For us, it means zero. And that's, they dole it out based on need. Well, it's not that we don't have needs. We don't have as big a needs as Miami-Dade, but we don't have their population and students either. But we still have needs.
we
And
need
so
to help our-
many of the districts haven't gotten
I think we
anything.
need to help our legislators make the case for why we do need to tax cell phones. We always have had a tax on our phone system in Florida. It has funded school construction. Keep the focus on that.
They know, you know.
But
each year
yet,
when we
they
meet with
can't
them-
make the argument for it because we're not, it needs, when the people hear something over and over, it starts to become reality. The reality is that no one's talking about, really, the newspapers or anything. Hey, everybody, you always paid tax on your phone and you're not now, we can't build schools. Hey, y'all. You know, when they hear it, and then when the legislature comes up saying it, it's going to be already heard. And that's what we need. That needs to be our new buzzword that we've moved along. We no longer have home phones, but the schools still need to be maintained. Move the tax.
When we've met with our legislators, when I've met with them the last 3 years, we have had this conversation, and it absolutely goes nowhere. So maybe this is the time that there is a grassroots effort. We get our school board associations involved, and we begin to have this conversation in a very proactive way. Show them the dollars, let them know that we have gotten zero for 10 years, and move forward in a grassroots way.
The cell phone
because
movement has really
because
hurt our
it's
school
not-
construction funding.
because that is correct. And we have had this conversation with our legislators every year about the dire need for school maintenance. And it's not that they don't sympathize with us, they just don't do anything about it.
But they get us
So-
in the weeds. They get us in the weeds. They can have their own opinions, but not a right to their own facts. Fact is, telephones have always funded our PICO dollars. Fact is, we still have telephones, but we're not using them in the same way. Period. And that, we don't need to let them get us in the weeds anymore. And that needs to be
So
a
that's,
constant mantra. Boom.
so I think a grassroots effort.
The one message, one voice thing.
Yeah.
where
And
we're all-
few words.
Yeah.
Time for a new dial tone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have another question when we're ready to move away.
I have another question too, so go ahead.
Go ahead, Miss.
I know that the Lakeware Middle School replacement school is not in
my
this
question.
5-year plan. So we have talked a little bit about that. We know that $5 million can go towards that school. Just within the 5-year framework, Robert, we know there's a process that we have to go through in order to build this replacement school, but is that in your thinking somewhere in the 5-year plan?
Yes, the process would be, it takes on average about 4 months to go to the state. What I do is I'll put together a survey recommendation, and that survey recommendation right now sounds like replace Lake Worth Middle School in its entirety. So obviously, we don't have the money today to do the entire thing, but the ground, where it would start on the ground is going to the state and saying, we're, just like we did years ago at Forest, we've outlived that purpose, we're gonna scuttle that school and move it and build a new one, a replacement. So it would take about 4 months roughly to do that, because I'll go to the state multiple times with the language and make sure that they're understanding what we're doing and that they're okay with it. Bless you. Then we come back to the board, get approval, and then go and do the actual amendment to the spot survey. So I can plug in those restricted funds anywhere in the plan in any year. Even if I put them in this year and we're not ready to use them, it would just simply roll over and roll over until we decided to go ahead and start something, or we get matching dollars or what have you. So it's, I can put that in at relative ease. I'd obviously be working with finance to show in the spreadsheet that, well, this restricted fund is going to go for an actual project. It's not just going to sit in a fund by itself anymore. But I can do that at any time.
I think that sends a really good message to that community, because we've been talking about this for years and years and years. And if they know that we're serious, just so that they know those dollars are plugged in for that replacement school, I would feel very comfortable with that, because we've been talking for years about this. And you know, if you've been to Lake Worth Middle and it's one of my schools, it's just time for us to make that commitment, because
The principal
in
couldn't
bad
even work in
shape.
the office without
Yeah,
mold
it's in
removal.
bad shape. So, and plus, you know, we can't get the parents involved in Lake Weir because they're coming from Silver Spring Shores. And it's a long way if you're driving from the shores to Lake Weir Middle, you know, and if gas is an issue for some of these folks because they live in the shores and they've got to come into town to do things, I think it sends a very powerful message. I don't know how anybody else feels, but I feel pretty strongly that we ought to at least earmark that and get that conversation started.
Ms. Stacy.
And that was when I said I have one more thing, that's it. When I said I have one more thing, Beth took it. And you said that, I think I heard you in your program here, that they don't give us much attention until the school's over 50 years old. How old is Lake Weir Middle?
It's over 50 years old. I think it was 1963.
Okay.
Somewhere in that ballpark.
We're in that arena.
Yeah, we're in the
The over 50-year arena. So, you know, because when you said that, I went, I know Lake Weir's got to be older than 50. When you said it in your presentation, and I didn't hear a lot of your other presentation because my brain kept saying Lake Weir Middle, Lake Weir Middle, Lake Weir Middle. So, because once I get on a rabbit, I chase it to its hole. So, let's talk. I'm with Beth McCall on this. Let's do what we need to do to get the state on our side. And no, hell's not freezing in the equator.
What a morning this is turning into.
All right, I'll go ahead and start the ball rolling on the spot survey, and then get with finance on how best to portray this in the 5-year work program as far as using
Okay.
at least that $5 million plus allotment.
Is there
Okay.
any other discussion on that?
Mr. Herlihy, the property is secured, right?
Yes.
We're all through with that, correct?
Yes. We own it.
We own it, okay. Okay, perfect. There we go. That's taken years. I wanted to be sure that was all clear and it was now ours. So we have the property, and
Paid
it's
it,
time to send that
done.
message.
Close it out. The order's entered.
That's been a well-kept secret, too. Let's get it out, that we own the property now. Let's make a big deal about it.
It's a
Well,
step.
Yeah, it's a big start.
All right, let's move forward.
I do have one other quick question.
Sure.
Hopefully, yes. I was interested with Horizon, because that's in Marion Oaks, right?
Yes.
Okay, and Marion Oaks, I think, is continuing to grow and poised for more growth, so it was interesting to me that the projection of 2023-24 is only 75%. Just kind
Yeah.
of stood out.
Horizon Academy, and they have fifth grade from Sunrise Elementary currently there. At one time, it was built as a middle school prototype that would house fourth through eighth grade, because we were trying to relieve pressure on Sunrise Elementary. And of course, in the meantime, Marion Oaks was constructed, and that took, I think, the first year, 400 students went to Marion Oaks from Sunrise. Mostly, I think, because people saw, well, brand-new school, I live between the two, my kindergartner is going to go there anyway, I'll just send my fifth grader there as well. So I think with some of that, it has split a little bit of that up as far as Horizon, and of course, the intent at Horizon is to serve as a self-sustaining middle school that would cover that entire area if fifth grade was to go back to Sunrise, or if something else were to happen. But yeah, that's where the projections look like, because on the outer fringes of the Marion Oaks area, some of those kids go to the west to Dunella Middle. Some of those other kids on the northern side go to Liberty Middle now, which was Westport Middle School when it was moved. And the folks on the other side of the interstate are probably still going to go to Horizon if it's closer, because 484 will run underneath the interstate and connect that way. But that's the projection anyway. So I think we've concentrated over the last 10, 12 years on additional seats in that Marion Oaks area, the southwestern corner, not corner, but corridor of Marion County. We built a wing at Sunrise, we built Hammett Bowen, we built Marion Oaks, we built Liberty, and we built Horizon, all west of the interstate and south of 200. And so that, you know, if the growth has leveled off, we've got a few seats here and there to give, maybe not tremendous, but traditionally it's south of 40 where we've always been impacted, you know, where most of the growth or most available land to grow has been.
Thank you for that. And my last comment is thank you, Nancy, for the PICO education, because it's very, very important. Our community has been so generous with our funding referendum, and it just doesn't seem palatable to go back to them anytime soon for capital help when we haven't gotten any maintenance help for 10 years from the state. It would be one thing if we had gotten a lot of help and we needed a little more and we could make the case. I just don't think we can make the case, so your information was very, very helpful. I say let's get on it.
Okay, thank you.
Few words.
Right. And everybody has cell phones, so it would resonate.
Few words. And everybody using that cell phone is in some way taking advantage of the school system, either where they're eating, someone was educated through a school system. You know, whether their children are using it or their grandchildren are using it. Everyone using a cell phone is receiving some type of advantage from the public school system. Period.
Truth. Yeah.
So it's a user fee. I'll call it a user fee too.
Future user fee.
Any more discussion? We're good. Thank you.
Mrs. King, do you want to stop for public comments on that piece, or would you like me to go on into the next presentation and wait till the end of both to do public comments? I'm good either way.
Any public comment? Seeing none. Okay,
Okay, thank you. Just to make sure I didn't misstep.
thank you.
Okay, we will go on now to the District Administration, MTI repurposing and consolidation. We've talked about a few times previous, and I just want to bring you up to date on the latest and greatest and explain how that fits into the confines of the 5-year district facilities work program. So we will start with a recap of previous discussions. This goes back to June was the last time we met. So we had looked at locations. We've looked at locations for a while now. And for future board meetings was the last mission if the school board building was sold. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the board has secured the county commissioners' chambers for future meetings. Is that correct, or do we still need to try to assist with future board meetings? I just want to make sure that we're not doing something we shouldn't, or should be doing something that we're not.
Where we stand right now, it's not from us, but Mr. Christian went out to the County Commission auditorium, and I think, what was it, between 40 and 50,000. So what Kevin, you would probably do a better job describing what all would need to be done. There needs to be some, I believe, some retrofits or.
The system that is used to broadcast the county commission meetings, or I should say record, because we actually broadcast them, is not entirely owned by the county. There's a private third-party vendor that owns the cameras. My philosophy is I would rather not use someone else's equipment, because if we're going to break equipment or do something like that, because those things happen, I'd rather break our equipment than someone else's equipment. So the equipment that we have actually behind this wall is designed in what I would call a horizontal rack. It's a large rack. It is on wheels. But the county commission building is old, and that rack will not fit through the doors to access the area behind the main wall in the main auditorium. We can reconfigure that equipment into more of a vertical rack that will go through those doors. There's a cost to that, but the biggest cost is a labor cost to run our own lines underneath that auditorium. There is a crawl space. I don't want to do that, and I don't think any of you want to do that. So the company that actually designed and installed this system came, and we walked that property, and their estimate was between $40,000 to $50,000. Now, I kind of have them on standby because I didn't want them to go through the process of doing an exact quote if that wasn't something the board was seriously considering.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so what, will the equipment fit through the MTI doors if we move to MTI for
Yes,
our
ma'am.
broadcasting?
Yes, ma'am. The only thing about that auditorium I would caution you is that's an 1,100-seat auditorium. This is a 50-seat capacity room, and we do fill it, you do fill it at times. Let's be generous and say 100 people at a board meeting. 100 people in an 1,100-seat auditorium is going to kind of look like this room looks right now. You're not going to have, it's going to look very empty. And my concern is, do you want that to be the look of your meetings? Because we use 4 cameras, and we can say, well, don't shoot the audience, but inevitably, that's part of your meeting space, so that's going to be there. So that would be the only thing I would caution
I
you
had a
on.
comment about that.
But yes, all of the equipment functions there. We broadcast the Student Media Festival from there, so there's no issue with that.
Because I really don't care about looking good. I want to be good. And I don't care if we
Understand.
don't look good, that there's not a lot of people there. If we're being good and it's accessible to people. And if we can do it for not a large nominal cost addition, then, I mean, I'm not really impressed when if the cameras hit this on, I never look at the board meetings, but in the old days before I was on the board, I haven't looked at a board meeting since I've been on the board. But if they look into the audience and it's jam-packed and people are standing, I think that's a much, much sadder message to the community.
The choice is
think
yours,
I
certainly.
think that I'm not one to do anything to look good. I want to be good. And it might not look good to have not a lot of people in the room, but it doesn't look good to me to have no room for people in the room either.
The choice is yours as a board, certainly.
Have we talked to City Hall? Have we talked to the city about their auditorium?
No, the only discussion we've had is
Yeah.
with the county,
So,
but
and
would
I
it
don't-
be the same?
Well,
Are you, city auditorium, are you meaning where the city
City Hall.
council meets?
Yeah.
City
Council chambers. The system that they have there was installed by the same company that we have. I don't know their exact configurations, but that may be,
A better solution?
well, it may not be as involved as what would be required at county commission.
Maybe
in
we want
terms
to
of
have
equipment.
that conversation, find out exactly, number one, would they be willing? And number two, what would the cost be? And at least we would have everything that is viable in front of us, and then we could make that
City
decision.
council meets every
Same
Tuesday
time.
evening, I believe.
I think
Currently.
it will conflict with ours.
Not on the same Tuesdays, though.
It's not the same too.
I think there's, because I've gone to many city council meetings, and I don't think they're on the same Tuesdays as ours. I think they're on the first
Are they-
and the third.
Do they have any other meetings during the week, though? Like, because I
You just have to ask.
I don't know.
can find out. We
But
can.
you know what? If we've got MTI and we control,
It's our facility.
it's our facility. So.
Why not use it?
But I know what Kevin is saying from a visual standpoint. It looks like a waste of space. When it's projected out, it's
anyway.
gonna look like we're wasting space.
It's there
That We're
anyway.
having a meeting of 50 people in a space that holds 1,100.
Okay, but
My-
it's there anyway. I think we're utilizing space. I think we've opened the space up to the public instead of hoarding it, sitting over there like hoarders, keeping it locked down where nobody can get in there.
I have an idea, to make it a little bit more intimate. What about those hopefully inexpensive, rolling curtains where, you could just go 9 rows back, roll those, so you'd have a nice background. And then if more people were coming in or were expected, you could move them back. So we
Don't we
could
have some of those
create.
positions?
That would make more
That,
sense.
that auditorium is our most used facility in terms of rental by community organizations. And I'm not naysaying the idea, but there are certain things you need to consider. The dais, for example, we need something on that stage. You can't do tables and chairs. It just won't, that won't look professional,
this
first of
one.
all. So you move this one, storage. I don't believe this dais would fit in any room there right now for storage. So that may impact the stage space
Well, you'd
and
have to
and the
roll it off the
availability.
stage when it's being
For-
rented.
When another group is
Productions
using the
and
stage,
leave it on
it
the
needs to
stage.
go somewhere, so I'm,
Permanent set item.
I mean, there's ballet recitals there's Kingdom of the Sun, there are big things that go on there.
it's a wonderful space, I'm not arguing that. There's just a lot to consider.
Right.
I guess I come from the generation can't, never could do anything, so.
I'm not saying that, Mrs. Stacy, at all.
I'm
We use that
Devil's
auditorium,
always in the details.
we use that auditorium for the Student
Implementation
Media
was a great
Festival,
idea, Stuart.
and
I want people to be able to come to our
Absolutely.
meetings. I don't like this.
We all do.
I do too.
I don't like the message we're sending. And we've been sending it for 30 years. And I'm up to here with it.
Can we,
it is your choice as a board,
can we start with checking with city council
certainly.
and go there first?
Because then we'll have 2. It sounds like we've sort of nixed the county commission because it's $40,000 or $50,000, and it's probably going to end up being more than that because it always is typically. It sounds like the city hall might be a next viable option to explore, and keeping MTI in the backs of our minds.
Yeah, MTI's Plan C maybe, B, C, wherever y'all want to put it.
I'd like to at least explore the city.
Yeah.
and see.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll just explore those
I'll
options.
reach out to my counterpart.
Thank you so much. and
Thank you.
we'll see
Yeah.
what we can
Yep.
come up with. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. The next item that we had from the previous was to begin due diligence or a more in-depth review of a 7.92 acre site that we were calling the Woodland Village site. I have information on that. And then we were also looking at the Phoenix Center site for a possible dual use it as a warehouse and sell the remainder of it. And what we were able to determine is there would be some access issues coming down that east-west path in front of the Phoenix Center. It's very narrow, it's a flag lot. And if we sold the back half or the front half, we'd have issues with how do we cross over somebody else's property? How would they cross over ours?
Put it on a public road.
Yeah, we would have to give it to the city, and they would probably want us to develop it. So there were some challenges there, and the value, as far as we can tell, would decrease quite a bit if it got cut in half, because now you've got a landlocked piece of property, and nobody's going to really want to put the money into it in terms of purchase. And we would have to, of course, knock down the existing buildings because they're right in the way of where you would want to develop. And I have some information as far as warehouse site for that. And then the last bulleted item was, we were asked to look at the life safety items. In other words, don't go spending a pile of money on these facilities if we wind up departing with them. And so that's was factored into the 5-year work program, but I'll explain as we get into the presentation. So I want to start with an update on the Woodland Village site, since we did do some due diligence, and then I have 2 other options for the board to consider. The Woodland Village site, just to bring you up to speed or remind you, is a 7.92 acre site. It sits on a major road, which is Merricamp. Water, sanitary sewer, and electric power are close by or on the road. I think water's on one side and sanitary sewer is on the other, and I cannot remember off the top of my head which of the 2 sides, but, so it's in the vicinity. There is some cut and fill operation of topography because it is somewhat rolling and can't build on slopes, and so we'll have to cut here and fill there, and there are some trees that have to be removed. The bigger challenge is the zoning and the size and configuration of the site itself, and I'll show you a map of the site in just a moment. But zoning is not set up to allow a warehouse on the site. Also, it would be very, very tight to try to do one if the zoning allowed it. And we anticipate some issues with trucks coming and going and really disrupting where we would have our district folks. And I'll show you all this graphically in a moment. And traffic is a concern as well as site access because of the way Camp Road is. When we built Forest High School, we tried to get a traffic light at both locations, and they wouldn't let us do it. They said, it's a state road, you got to be 1,600 feet away to get another light. And we were only 1,300 feet away with the turn to the east on Forest High School's property. So we anticipate we'd have the same challenge here. There's already a light at the intersection, and there's no way we're going to get another light. It's going to be right turn only, and if everybody's coming to work, they're going to have a lot of trouble getting in.
And Robert, I do know that Ocala Health tried to get a light, and they said no, with the new emergency department.
Yeah, right there
So,
by
yeah,
the
so
church.
us being able to put a light there would not happen.
Yeah, we appreciate knowing that. It seems to lead credence to what we ran into already. I'll show you the site. We'll go to the next page, and there is an aerial of the site itself. It's kind of a reverse L shape, and there's just some photos of what the site itself looks like. It's a relatively nice-looking site, but I'll show you in a moment how the layouts that we did might work or not work. The sale price is a little over $1.5 million, and again, it's just under 8 acres for that entire parcel. So we'll look at the next sheet, and this is about as good a layout as we could come up with. As you notice, there's the absence of a warehouse because there's just no room for it, and we would have to collect stormwater. We've got a vegetated buffer around it because there were some challenges with folks in the past that tried to get that site and develop it. There was a lot of concern with this western drive-in. You see at the top of the page, there is a traffic light up here. And if our folks were leaving work all at the same time, or trucks were trying to get out that route, it could potentially block that neighborhood from access, and we anticipate that would probably be a concern of the cities or counties in terms of traffic hangups there, especially at peak times. But the office site that we laid out would be 90,000 square feet. Unfortunately, there would only be parking for 273 spaces, which is just around what we have at MTI now. And so we wouldn't be able to have an opportunity to build additional parking. So it could be tight if everybody's at work and there were some training sessions or something going on. So the pros are the location. It's not too bad. It's not too far out of town. It's on a major road. Utilities are close by, but the biggest issues are site access and the size itself. 7.92 acres is half the size of what we build for an elementary school, less than half the size, and you're talking 300-plus people that could be here at any given time. But we do have 2 other options for the board to consider. We found these out by accident because we've just about exhausted looking for land that's actively for sale. So I want to introduce both of these sites to you. The first we're calling the Forest High site. It's a 14.64 acre parcel that is diagonally across the street from Forest High School. It sits on Camp Road. It's further out than the site we just spoke about. Water, sanitary sewer, electric power are all close by. Access is less of an issue because of the frontage on Camp is a little bit wider. And but at the same time, the site itself is very shotgun-like. It's very narrow, and when you have a facade for a business or a facility, you want your entire facade facing the road, and we're going to have to turn this thing 90 degrees and be looking at the side of a building just to fit something sizable there that's going to work for the school district. The site does allow for some warehousing in the back of the property because it does also back front a side street. And clearing and preparation would be a little more expensive on the site because of the way the site is. And it is the furthest from town compared to some of the other sites we looked at. So I'll show you what the site itself looks like. The entire box of red is owned by one outfit, and what's being proposed is what's in orange. And as you see, it infringes on an existing parking area. That's just some pictures of what the site looks like. Again, nice for parkland and what have you, and it does have access at the back and at the front of Camp Road, even though it's at an angle. So we did a series of layouts of how we would fit buildings on there that would be the size we need.
Where would 31st Street be? On further up, behind 38th?
Yeah, Forest High School is right down here.
Okay.
And this is going kind of northwest on Camp Road.
Yeah, there's a lot more place there too.
Yes.
Mike's
yeah,
Lawnmower.
and then
Yeah, it's been there forever.
Yes.
You're talking
That's
about
a
the
new
property
gas
on the
station.
other side.
Yes, the Circle
of
K.
Forest High
Yes.
School.
Yes.
Fancy Circle K,
It's a Circle K.
because gas stations and grocery stores are
And so
a thing now.
we don't have a whole lot of frontage on this piece. It is, if you look at the acreage, the acreage is decent. The bigger challenge we saw is the configuration of the acreage on that site. It's, like I said, you'd have a narrow area where people would be driving in, and well, I'll go ahead and show you the next slide on the layout and explain that. So we pulled out a separate building for school board purposes, but as you notice, a lot of the parking is behind the actual building. And then you almost have to restrict the back area just for a warehouse. If trucks came through off of Maricamp and you had an event going on, training or a school board meeting or something, it could be an issue. But there is some positives for it. We would have a 60,000 square foot building, a separate board building, and it doesn't have to be separate. We just showed it to try to push advertising who we are up to the front as best we can. And then there would be a warehouse of about 50,000 square feet. Parking goes up to about 350 spaces. The good things about it are the acreage, the fact utilities are close by and it's on a major road and it's a little better accessible because you have a backdoor entrance to it. But the location's further out. Site prep will be somewhat of an issue, and the site is narrow, very narrow compared to the other sites we looked at. And it does kind of direct us into a corner as far as how we lay this building out. If we put the main building on the front, all the parking would be behind it, and that may or may not be a great
Are you
thing.
still- The bottom right-hand corner, is that the traffic light at Forest?
Yes, yeah,
So-
this is,
Driveway.
Forest High School is down
Right,
here,
right.
and our other entrance is over here on Maricay.
Right,
So
so-
there's already a light here.
There's a light there that
Get
goes
in.
into Forest. So
And-
that means you would have traffic from high school.
And that is another challenge, yes, because if we put another entrance out, it would only be a right turn. There'd be no way to do a median.
Right.
State road, it's way too close. It's even closer than the driveway at Forest. And
Correct.
so, and I think I neglected to talk about the asking price, but the previous slide, it was better than 2 million. 2,219,307 is the asking price on it. So it's 700,000 more than the previous site. So that's the first alternative site. Yes, it is. So you're getting a little more land. The next alternative site I'll show you is something called Lake Louise, what we've named it. It's better than 20 acres. It's got water, sanitary sewer, and electric already on the site. Water line actually runs at the back of the property. It is the largest and least expensive site per acre of all the ones we've looked at. It allows a warehouse, it allows the most parking of all the other sites, and it is by far the closest to town. It is literally right down the street from our compound, right down the street from MTC. If you go down 7th Road, which is where I'm based at, all the way to the bypass road, which is 36, it is that, I'll show you in a minute the aerial, but it is that parcel that was recently cleared and slated for development. And again, we came across this by accident by talking to the landowner and finding out that there might be some willingness to do a deal. And I'll get into that here in just a moment. So it's the closest to town. It's easy access to 441, the west side of 200 and of 75 and the Bellevue area. It's a straight shot down Shady Hill Road. Site clearing is done. The site's pretty much level. It's almost shovel-ready. I've walked that site a couple of times, and the road frontage is only 2 lanes, but there's plans for a second road at the back, which would give us a back door. And there is a willingness by this landowner to engage in a trade of properties, meaning that they take some property from us, we take that, it wouldn't cost any money that would be exchanged. And any money that we earmarked for purchasing the site could immediately go into getting this site ready for, that might take care of your problem with where to meet and get the board building going first. So let's look at the actual aerial photo. This is the bypass road, we keep calling it the bypass road, that goes from west side of I-75 on 200 all the way out to Baseline. That's 7th Road that if you continue north, you run right into 200. That orange block is the proposed site location. The rest of this is slated for other types of
Point to me
development.
200.
200 is the ceiling. 200 is the ceiling. So if you go up 7th Road, you make a slight curve by the railroad track. That railroad track runs right behind the maintenance building, and this crosses between our compound and MTC, 7th Road. And it
completely
comes right out there to 200.
So where that road runs in front of Trinity Catholic that connects, is that what we're talking about?
So,
Yes, this road, if you continue east,
Yeah.
runs right in front of Trinity Catholic. It crosses over 475, which you take to go to Shady Hill Elementary. You go to the Bellevue schools that way. At least that's how we get there. And it runs all the way out to the baseline area. And
in between where Trinity Catholic and Pine Street is, there's a big, huge lot that has been cleared. It's that very busy road that goes from Maricamp all the way out, dumps into 200. You can take a little side road and go to the Market Street.
yeah, 441 is about over here where I'm holding the rod, or Pine Street. And that's correct. If you continued west, you'd pass Trinity Catholic and 27th Avenue, which goes by the movie theater, and then it eventually
Where the public-
comes out at 200.
Right across from, if you keep heading east, you'll see it on the corner. It's all that land that's been cleared.
So Forest Hill, at the top, where it says Forest Hills Apartments,
Yeah, those are apartment complexes.
is that South Pine?
South Pine, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
South Pine
I know
runs,
where you are now.
it's about over here. It kind of curls around and then
Swings
comes into
around.
it.
But that
And-
would be up, you're actually going back into town, north.
Yes, if you go north, you go
You're going back
into Ocala. This is on the southern
Gotcha.
fringes of Ocala. That's just some pictures of the site. There's a Lime Rock Road. It's pretty much just a big patch of clearing. There's a few palm trees in there. The sale price is right at $2 million is what, it's not for sale, but there is interest there from the landowner. And well, if I were to sell it, that's what it would be sold at. It's like 22.65 acres, I think, is what that orange box represents. And the water line runs right here.
Nice.
And some of your biggest sinkholes are in there, right?
Well, this is an old sinkhole. There is wet areas there. The south bottom piece floods. We have not done any due diligence on it yet, just simply because this is the first time I'm introducing it to the board. So we don't have a whole lot on the soils, except there were heavy trees there. And I asked, well, what kinds of trees? Because pine trees don't like acidic soil, and that's usually an indicator of clays or lime rocks. But they cleared it before we could go out there and look.
Wasn't there like some caverns or something back there too?
Oak Creek Caverns.
Not on that
Not on that
No,
side.
that's not.
Yeah, it's on the southern and further over, and of course, by Trinity Catholic, same thing. There's a lot of activity there. So as far as, well, what would that mean if we,
What did he want to trade for?
well, I can tell you now, or tell you in the, they want to trade, they're interested in this block, the finance block, and the warehouse. They're really, really interested in the warehouse and this block, where the school board building is. And it would amount to basically, we give them ownership of those 3 blocks, and they give us ownership of that 20-something acre site.
Eagle
Fine deal.
Swap.
Let's do it today.
Yes, and I asked about, well, what about utilities? What about access roads? They have to bring the sewer line into the property for their own development. The sewer line right now there's a lift station about right behind this picture. And it could be brought in right alongside the water line that's already there. And already, there's a series of hydrants all through the back area. I was surprised how far along the utilities were.
Did they share with you what they were thinking of using the land for?
Yeah,
they cleared it for a
these
reason.
blocks, yes, the bottom half was all residential. They anticipated where the orange block is would probably also be residential. That's what it's zoned for now. And north of that block, there was talk about somebody like the Veterans Administration having a facility there. And so it would stand the reason that, well, if we got in there and there were a connecting road and the sewer line was brought up, like the developer is intending to do anyway, and we built a 4-lane road for trucks, we would have a border on the north side of the property that would get us to 7th Road, or the back side. And again, once you get off-site, you have access to many, many different arteries to get you around Marion County. So I'll show,
Anybody independently do a survey on this to see what the value is? I know he's saying it's about 2 million. But have we done that? Because I'm thinking that would be a very good trade for this person, because this block is coveted, what he's wanting.
We haven't yet. We are getting appraisals done as we speak
Okay.
on this block,
Okay.
the warehouse, and the finance block.
Yeah.
And I'm moving the money around. It's actually, Mr. Gibbs is helping us get to a point we can get this, because that would be part of the due diligence. Before there was a
Is our
deal,
space we've got.
a hair over one, it's like 1.15 or something like that acres. I think combined, all three blocks are, maybe 4 acres, something like that, combined.
Each one of the blocks is just a shade over an acre.
So basically 4 acres for 20 cents.
5, yeah.
Yes.
Intriguing.
And I'll show you a layout of what this site might look like on the very next slide. This is kind of maybe small to read, so we took that and blew it up. This is 7th Road. If we came in and there was we drew in a 4-lane road, figuring, well, if you're going to use it for trucks and what have you, and it becomes a connecting route, you'd come in, we'd put some retention pond. The parking here is 450 spaces is what we anticipate. It's big enough for an 80,000 square foot office building and a warehouse that's 50,000. Plenty of room for retention. Matter of fact, it slopes towards the back. This could be a completely independent warehouse. They could even come in the bottom side if that road were connected. We could build our piece. And we put in the middle a training building, just because when we had looked better than 2 years ago at how to lay out an office building, well, one of the things that happens at MTI is training of teachers and administrators and principals and what have you. So if you cordon off a whole area of your office building and you use it for training, even if it's used every day for a different use, you've got to design some fairly large spaces for training. Well, this training building could be in heavy use, but there could be one big meeting space and several smaller spaces, and people could come and go in their training and not kind of conflict with some of the other happenings on the campus. Of course, it doesn't have to be a separate building, but we were trying to figure out, well, what do we do in the middle? If this winds up being a 80,000 square foot actually it was 90, and we broke it off and just tagged a little spot. Not that any of this has to happen this way, but we laid out several configurations and thought this might be kind of nice. You've got a front office, and you can separate your wings into, well, this is the board's suite with the board room. Public would have plenty of place to, parking and access to it. And then, of course, some of the other functions like curriculum, finance, what have you, can happen elsewhere in the building. But you would have a central entry point, a central lobby. There's a lot of possibilities just because of the size of the property. It's by far the biggest we've looked at.
Is this property in the city limits or county?
It is not currently in the city limits. It's in the county. The developer or the landowner of the southern part is looking to have it annexed into the city. But right now, it is in county property. The city limit is about halfway between the site and our compound.
How would that affect us if that happened, the annexation? Would it?
Most cases, we tend to have ourselves annexed in the city. We did it at Westport because we built all the infrastructure and turned it over to them. And in order for them to take over the infrastructure, they said, so there's a strip of land along 38th Avenue that goes through the county, and then there's this big patch of land called Westport High that's part of the city. But you drive on a county road to get to it, and 5 feet off the road is city property for 20 feet wide. But if this were taken into the city, they would take over ownership of the utilities. Again, there's already a water line there, and the owner is going to extend the sewer line to the lift station. So really what would happen is you get annexed into the city, and they provide your fire, police protection, and then they take over the water and sewer service for you. There is communication lines along 7th Avenue. We are having technology explore whether it's exactly what they would need, because they would move to this site as well. But there is internet service right at the road edge already. So as far as the city taking over, they may not necessarily take over communications, but they would be the primary supplier of utilities for us and would provide our police and fire. I guess that would be the only real change. I don't know, Dave, if there's anything else to really share on advantages of becoming city annexed or not.
There's a surcharge or a surtax on the cost of utilities when you're outside the city. So that's something to, obviously as a school board don't pay ad valorem taxes, but when you're outside the city limits, you pay a higher rate ongoing for water and sewer. That's one thing that stands out. So the other thing is, when we come inside the city, then we would design the site to accommodate stormwater on site to address that issue.
Right.
Which we have the land to do it. So it's not like we would have to go and get other properties for it. So the pros are that, well, the location, because it's much closer to where you all are now versus some of the other sites. The size of it, it's ample to do what we would like to do. The utilities are pretty much already there. The site prep is minimal. And the fact that the owner is interested in a trade really sweeten the pot, I think, in terms of discussion, simply because I've got money budgeted to buy land, and if we don't spend it, that's almost $2 million we don't spend in our current 5-year plan. So we'll go to the cost comparisons of these sites. On the far left is the Woodland Village site. With construction, buying the property design, we're about $23,079,584. That center area is Forest High, the Maricamp site of 14.64 acres, about 23.5 million, and obviously the Lake Louise site, if it were where that orange box is, if it became a wash in terms of purchase, you're a hair over 21 million, $5,070 over what I had projected the entire cost to be buying property design and construction. So that's certainly within line with where we budgeted as far as our estimates are concerned. And before we leave the entire discussion of the big picture, I wanted to kind of recap the MTI situation as well, because that is factored into the bigger picture. And so if we go one page over, this is a quick recap of the previous MTI discussion, and it'll be slide 13 in your presentation. And there was talk in the past about relocating MTI to the MTC campus. Just as a refresher, we were talking about 45,000 square feet would be needed for current and near future programs. The funding plan, if we go the route of the borrowing of the money, we could do it. It would give us $9,680,700, and that is dependent on the student stations. Right now, we have 300 student stations in our work program for that school per the state. The borrowing for building MTI is already calculated into the 5-year work program, so we would not have to do anything different in terms of juggling. It's something that we built into it in the 5-year work program in case we went that route. If you don't go that route, obviously that debt isn't taken on. And then the funding and construction of a new MTI could be independent of county office, or it could run concurrent with county office. And then the other thing to point out at MTI is joint use with other entities is limited because of the size of that property. We'll go to a quick look at the map of the school next slide. And what that shows you is, this is what we talked about. I think June was the last time we would have to add additional paid parking for the students. There would be a lobby that was shared between the schools, an MTI classroom building, a separate culinary arts, and a combined construction and auto industry lab. And we had built a road on the backside for deliveries and fire safety, because they always like to try to get access to your back buildings. And again, if you look at the total of the different pieces and parts of the school, it would be about 45,000 square feet, which would allow some growth, especially for classroom activities. And then the cost, how that would all break down. We'll go one more slide in on slide 15, and that'll show you a snapshot of design, construction, all the different facilities and functions of MTI if it were to move, the additional parking and other, which would be taking portable classrooms and moving them to other brick and mortar spaces so that we had the room for it, and it would be $9,680,700.
Did you include the new road?
Yes, that's the road on the backside of it.
Included that in this price?
Yes. Yeah, there is one there, but we need to realign it because it comes too far into the site. It's a 2-lane road, and it would most likely be used for staff or folks dropping off auto parts for the auto lab or what have you. So if we look at the big picture on all these, MTI and the other sites combined, we'll go one more slide still. And on the far left is the relocate MTI to MTC, $9,680,700. And again, that would be funded through borrowed money that's already right now calculated into the 5-year work program, and obviously it can change as the board desires. Then you have the Woodland Village site, the Forest High site, and the Lake Louise site. If you combine Woodland Village and MTI, we'll be about $2 million over what we had projected the overall budget to do all this stuff would be. If you look at the Forest High site, because the purchase site is higher, you wind up $2.5 million over. And if you look at the Lake Louise site, obviously because it's a trade, you're only $5,000 off what we had projected months ago the overall cost to be. So from a number standpoint,
Numbers did you project in that for this block of property, these blocks?
well, as far as replacing all these blocks and the district office only to MTI, we just budgeted 21 million. We just flat out said 21 million. We got to cap it. There was a floating cap for the first few presentations. And obviously,
What kind of credit had you factored in for all of this towards that?
we had factored in, I think it was roughly 300,000 a block or something. What was the early projection, Dave? Do you remember on the value of these 3 blocks? I think we were,
Mike?
Is the question asking about the appraised values that?
Yes.
I'll let Ms. Thrower talk a little bit. I'm stealing her questions.
Same question. What's all this worth?
All in all, the properties, when we appraised them all, were about 2.1, I think, total. So that included $95,000 for the parking lot, that's just the grass strip lot across from the warehouse over there, and then also this parking lot out
So
here.
the land swap is right in line with what you had figured selling all this for, like on your original thoughts.
Seems to
Okay.
be consistent, but as the question that came up before is, what is the appraised value
No.
of the Lake Louise property? And we don't know that, as Robert said,
Yeah,
so it'll be
yeah.
part of due.
What about, have we done an appraisal on the MTI and the Phoenix property yet?
we did we did Phoenix maybe a year and a half ago, and MTI, we're gearing up to do that appraisal as well. We're just, everybody's busy, so we're trying to grab all the open slots we can to get those rolling.
And
And
the other site we looked at for an appraisal was the site out at Reddick.
Yes, the northeast side of the current Reddick School.
So I'd like to get all of those appraisals together.
You just want to compile them, the list of numbers?
Well, I'd like to know what each
We
one
wanna
is
see the
worth, but
columns.
I'd like to see,
List the
yeah.
property, list the value, and provide it.
Because one of the many strengths of this presentation is it's so straightforward and easy to understand. And I love how you listed the pros and cons.
Yeah.
Really a great presentation.
Thank you. Tried to make it as easy to read as possible, because obviously this is a big decision. It's not one that gets made every week, and we just tried to cover every possible base we could. As far as the costs, I can answer any other questions. At this point, there is a summary of the entire presentation, and then after that is just questions and answers if you had
And
any.
unimproved land might not, you don't a lot of times get a great appraisal on unimproved land. So the appraisal on Rudiani's land out there might not come up to where this, but unimproved. I'm sorry. Well, it's public record, isn't it?
One thing to note,
Everybody can look at the,
and we ran into this when we appraised these sites originally, is, the appraisal is always asking, well, what would the future landowner use this site for? Well, obviously, we don't know. I mean, they might bulldoze the building and make it a parking lot, or put another hotel up, for all we know. Or they might just paint the place and put a roof on it and cut up the offices inside and use it for a couple of lawyers sharing a building together. So the value, we have to go obviously based on the appraised value. The value to whoever is going to acquire it could be drastically different than we have. Right now, it's a board office and school board offies, but,
doesn't always come up to what it is valuable to the people purchasing it.
It's always worth less, yeah.
So can I make a suggestion, Madam Chair?
Well, before you do, I have one more. I know you presented your plans, but just this past week, I did have somebody come before me, and I think Beth, he mentioned you, maybe he has spoke to others. I have been approached by a developer, and they would like to maybe give a second opinion on the Star Banner building. I know that there is a lot of interest in purchasing this land, and he seemed to think that the first quotes that we received, if we were to purchase that Star Banner building, may not be accurate. So he and his companies, they would like to do a study and to see if they could give us a better deal than what was first presented to us. I don't know if that is something we would want to reconsider again, and he asked if we could have a workshop at an upcoming date, or no?
I can comment on the most recent cost of that. If you're talking about a local developer in town, I've dealt with those folks, but I've also dealt with the parent company that owns the Star Banner, and they're based in New York. And they have interest in selling. You may recall from some of the presentations, it was over 10 million, and we said, not even close, forget it, we're done. And the board wanted to move on past an existing building. I think one of the commentaries was, why do we want to build a 25, 30-year-old building and then have to fix it? And our building is 50 years old, we're having to fix it. So that was one thing that I recall from previous discussion. The other is, they would be willing to sell it for 6.4 million, but then again, you've got to spend 2 to 3 million on the air and the roof. You're going to approach 9 or 10 million lightning fast between purchase and fixing the building up before you even cut it up for district use. And it is landlocked, so just remember that, I appreciate them wanting to come back, but I've heard directly from the owners of the building, not any brokers or anybody else, but the folks that actually own the Star Banner and own that facility of who I've been talking to.
How big is the land there? How many acres?
Oh, that land? I don't remember now. I think it's like 7, maybe 8. It's-
He was just asking if he could just give a study with the land, the retrofit and everything. He seemed to think the numbers could be a significant difference than what was presented to us originally. So I would also, are you guys interested in hearing a workshop or considering that at this point? Or I would like to hear it too. I don't think it's bad to, if we're
Well,
really going to do this.
if we can move forward with looking at this particular site and all of that, yes, I'm very willing to listen, but I think it's going to end up costing us about the same to fix an old building. So, I have to do my due diligence, so
Right, and
absolutely.
that's all we're doing is doing
So-
our due diligence and.
So I'd like to
seeing
move
what's out there.
forward with, number one, getting the appraisals on the existing sites, do some due diligence on that property. I think that property, if makes more sense to us than the other two.
Like
we were
Louise, you
looking
mean?
at. Yes.
Yeah.
And then in the meantime, we can have the gentleman come in and talk about the Star Banner site. I'm
Right.
totally fine with
I think
that.
it's important for us to take everything, because that looks good, but when I see 22 acres in these large buildings, we're not growing as a district. As a matter of fact, we're downsizing. So the other day when I read in the paper that we're expanding, I have to ask, why are we expanding so large when in reality, we're not expanding as a district, we're getting smaller. And we know that it seems the educational system is changing some with charter schools and everything. So I just think it's good for us to explore all our options. Paul, can I add, I think September 5th, we have enough time to advertise, or Elena?
I won't be here September 5th. I was going to tell y'all, I'm in leadership with Florida School Board Association, and we have a leadership
Okay.
retreat at that time.
Well, we can still have a work session
Yep,
without
and
you
I
being
can
here.
listen.
And then you can listen. So I would like to add him to the September 5th, just so that way we can explore all our options.
And just to make sure go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, that as far as the Star Banner building, that was having all of the office space and warehouse combined because the building's so big? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on my
And
memory
we have
there.
to build additional office and warehouse because that building is only 80,000 total. And we're looking at 90 just for offices and 50 for a warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
So you only have 10,000 square feet of warehouse at the Star Banner building. We'd have to build the
There were some
rest.
roofing issues too with the.
The roof needs to be replaced, so does the main chill water system. It's
Right, right.
very old.
Okay, but-
I wanted to hear all this, but I also want to, that land, I seem like I just remember as a kid that land had some sinkholes and stuff. I would want to make sure that we do our due diligence on those
Yeah,
surveys.
we'll be doing borings to uncover what, we do this anytime we look at new property. We did it at the one we recently
So
acquired.
do we do it, at what point, though, do we do the borings?
I would say you do it now. Now, we've done it both ways as a district. We've purchased property and then done it, and we've done it and then purchased property,
I'd
which
rather
is,
do it ahead of time. 'Cause I don't wanna get
that's
stuck.
what I would recommend. Doesn't do any good to know what you know after you've acquired it, so.
But at what point, do you wait for us to say, do the borings, or?
Well, I think if the board has interest, then we would go ahead, and this is important to note, in the 5-year plan, I've got money in there budgeted for purchasing. So you'd use some of that to do your due diligence, and then, of course, if it's a swap, you don't use the balance for purchasing. And then I've got additional money, right now, everything's still earmarked for this building, MTI, others, so if we wish to abandon that, I can put that in the 5-year plan, but I don't have another chance to come back to you before you vote. It'll just be in the plan, you'll have to see it, and I'll have to send you something separate email if you do that. I can cover some of these questions in the summary. If we go real quick to the summary page, I'll hit on those questions and give you, we looked at the 3 sites and the possibility of a swap, and the largest parcel is the one that provides the best bang for their buck in terms of comparison. And the MTC site can accommodate MTI, but the work program can cover this in 3 years. If we were to get property this fall, whether it's Lake Louise or something else, and we were to go ahead in the 5-year work program and convert dollars, it may not be the exact same funding because it depends on when the money was advertised for what use. But if we worked it to where we're not spending money at MTI and these blocks, and that money got channeled into projects to free up money to go develop this, it is certainly theoretical that by the fall of 2022, we'd have everybody in. The entire school district office, the board, the curriculum folks, the finance folks, everybody could be in there within a 3-year span of this fall, just because of the way that we can work the construction and the way the funding is set up. I can tell you that pretty much as far as continuing the search for property, we're almost out of time for this fiscal year, and we just don't see it. We've looked even additional property, and they're either way out in the shores, or they're almost in Alachua County, or they're a ranch surrounded by residential development. They're not conducive to something we could develop. So really, if we're going to look at the Star Banner, what we would, sounds like we're down to is re-entertaining the idea of buying an existing facility that would need retrofit, or a clean piece of property. So that looks like the 2 options, and on the 5th, I'll certainly dig up the previous presentation and numbers to have that ready for discussion.
Well, and the bad thing about a retrofit, though, is that, as a contractor, I happen to know, to get real estimates are tough as that building starts being unbuckled.
You're going to find
You
stuff.
can get some real surprises.
You normally do when you're re-retrofitting,
So,
especially a building that age.
But if they've approached us with interest, I say, let's,
I think it,
let's hear what they have to
I
say.
definitely want to hear
Yeah.
what they have to say,
Right.
but I can also give you my professional opinion on it as a contractor for 30 years. We can't really get a real estimate on a retrofit. We will not know. It will be a flowing change order. That'll happen.
So, okay. Well, as far as anything else left to add to the soup pot, really we're down to, want to make sure that I get some direction or clarification, because, again, I'm going to be presenting this 5-year work program, and I definitely don't want to put projects in there we're not going to do, and not put projects in there that we are going to do. So I'd like to know if there is any commitment on going forward on the MTI site, moving to MTC. What that would involve is really just me talking to finance on how that would all work. But if there's interest in doing it in the 1920 school year, there may be nothing I've got to do to the 5-year plan. Then again, I may have to create a line item for it. Just know that we've factored in what the borrowed estimated amount would be in terms of a debt payment through this whole 5 years. And then the other thing is, obviously, we'll move forward on due diligence for the Lake Louise site. We'll have these appraisals probably within a week to 2 weeks for these 3 blocks. I can send that in as a separate bulletin to all of you in case you want to know before the next chance we
Great.
get a chance to
Sooner the better.
and then from there, move on. And just know that right now, if you look at the 5-year plan, you won't see anything in there as far as building new warehouse or anything else. It'll be fix up MTI, and it's only there because we've stopped, we're not gonna fix it. But if we wait past this school year, my fear is that it's gonna start to need some heavy work, and you're gonna start to spend money there. So it's not that we're under pressure, but that site's been sitting a long time. And every time I go there, I notice something a little bit new in terms of degradation, and eventually it's gonna make the decision for us.
So Robert, could you do this also for us? Could you tell us over the next 5 years what you estimate us to spend on district offices and MTI? I mean, I could add it all up. I think it's like
It's-
18 million or
But
something.
a little over $18 million, we only have 10 of it. We would be short 8 to do everything that we should do.
You already
And
have 10 of it in the plan, though,
yes, 10 of it's in the plan.
in there already?
Yes, it's all earmarked for, mostly for MTI.
And funded.
Yes. And then I added additional, we got a bump, I think, in year 3, and I carved off a piece of that to put towards a new facility. That is in the plan in year 3, but if that MTI money were to revert into warehouse district offices, regardless of where we go in terms of which property, it's theoretical that at least on a clean site, we could do it in 3 years. A retrofit, maybe not as much, might take longer because A, you've got to get folks out of your way, and it's very hard to come in there and start working around them, and B, even though we've walked those sites, admittedly, it is a little hard to see inside of the pipes and what have you that are there. So that's all I've got in terms of
What
presentation.
does it take for us to tell you? At what point will you be ready for us to say, would you do ground checks?
Now, I could do them now, soil borings and what have you, because we tend to run those, it
I don't
takes.
think we can make a good decision.
Wait a minute, how much does that cost? Because we haven't even heard the other presentation yet to make a decision, and I
But we
think
can't really make a decision on the other one until we've heard whether this is even an option to
Yeah,
buy.
I agree.
We gotta, when we hear the other one, then we gotta know what our options are with this, because this might not even be a possible project if it's loaded with caverns.
I see what you're saying. How much
So-
does that cost to do that?
Depends on how many borings you do. On a site this big, we would probably do between 10 and 15. Just the borings alone will be close to 10. If we do a ground penetrating radar study, it's about another 5, so 16, 17,000 should cover
It
borings.
have to be done eventually anyway.
Yes, we would have to just to develop it because,
I really know that ahead of time before
Yeah.
purchasing a property like that,
So,
or swapping for a property like that.
Before we get too far into it, we have to even see if
we have
it's
to know that.
a
yes.
possibility.
Yeah, there's usually 4 things we do. We do an environmental study, we do a civil engineering study, we do a soil boring study, and we do topographical charting of the property, finding the slopes, the exact positioning of this parcel within the larger one. Now, the landowner tells me that, well, I'm doing that anyway, the topo study, and I'm going to do the environmental study anyway, so it's really a matter of timing. If they can do it inside of 30 days, I say let them do it. If it's going to take them 6 months, it's not a whole lot more for us to do. We will definitely do the borings because we would know what kinds of foundations that we would need. In the civil study, I don't know if it's necessarily a need at this point because we already know the utilities are on site. We don't
Yeah, but
necessarily
the
need to go find them.
Engineering part of it is magical, that works out, but the
Yes.
soil borings are permanent. I mean,
Yeah,
that's,
soil borings, the ground doesn't tend to move very much.
Now,
I think
we
so.
can't make an intelligent decision unless we do that.
Although by the time all that is set up,
We need to
it
rule
might
it
be
in.
after the 5th anyway, and we will have heard the presentation on the Star Banner, and we'll know whether or not that's even a player.
So that gives us.
So if we have the soil borings,
So-
we'll know whether this is even an option of property to even have another meeting
So can we
about.
proceed forward with the borings
Okay.
and
I guess there's
authorize that?
consensus.
To rule it in or rule it out.
What about the MTI to MTC? Ladies and gentlemen, he asked us about moving forward with MTI to MTC.
There is an updated appraisal for MTI on your list, right?
There, yes, we're working on getting that accomplished. I don't think we did an MTI appraisal. Okay, so this would be a brand-new one, not a update of a past one.
And then also with the MTI, I mean, I know we're going to meet next week, the Fasano buildings, and that could be key players and helping, if they could help in any way? Would that even be something we would have to do now without even us visiting that Fasano building and knowing what direction we want to go as a board? Does that make
Not quite sure I follow.
Well, he's
where-
got the, you have the loan built into the 5-year plan. Is that what I heard?
Yes,
9
Okay.
point something.
So he's
Nine-
got the loan built
9,680,000.
into the 5-year plan. And so if we want to have the possibility of moving forward with putting MTI at MTC, we have to let him know, do we want that to stay in the 5-year plan? I think
so
that's
that
what
Yes.
you're
has no
asking.
effect-
yes.
Okay, so that's nothing definite, like in the sense that if we decide to go the Fasano route, that is not a key player or anything in that.
No, the amount there is what we could borrow, because it depends on the size of your school. So what I did is I took the 9,680,000, worked with finance, and we put it into the 5-year plan as a cost. Now, obviously, that means that the board frees up 9,680,000, and you pay it off as a separate line item debt. That debt is already factored in. What's not shown in the 5-year plan is spending that 9,680,000. So it's almost like you take a loan out, you got almost $10 million to work with. And what I'm needing to know is that the path we want to go on? In other words, leave the debt shown, pre-factored in before the 5-year plan, and it's already all laid out, and then we would turn around and use that borrowed money to build a new MTI as part of moving off of this site. So as far as that site visit, we're going to see a vocational school? Is that what that was?
It's like
It's a
Pasco, the
shelter.
shelter.
Special needs.
Oh, a shelter.
Shelter.
Oh, that
Which was
probably.
tying into, if we moved MTI to MTC,
Right.
there was conversation, right, about
putting a
using
shelter.
that as a special needs shelter.
It
co-
could be used as.
A dual use,
Dual
yeah,
use
dual
during the year.
use.
Yeah, I can tell you from studying the MTI, or the MTC site, rather, we're not going to be able to build an MTI and a shelter. There's just no room to meet the water management permit requirements. You'd have a complete concrete site with no way to relieve stormwater, and the south side of that area floods heavily, every rain, because that's the way I go home. And I can tell you that you would face an immediate barrier on water management permitting. And I know that, because I've engaged in that shelter talk too, that it's a grant. Grants are usually very restrictive, and we would have to have assurance, as you would as a board, that somebody could borrow money and build us classrooms. Because if they borrow money and whoever they're getting the grant from, or getting the grant says, no, it's not for classrooms, it's strictly a shelter, we'd be out in the cold on our own site. It's just something to be aware of. Grants are very, very restrictive. And my experience with them over almost 18 years is that if you're going to borrow it for cafeteria, you can't pave a parking lot with it. You can't go put a roof in. If we want it, and this is just food for thought, and it's unsolicited, and it's just something that I've thought about before, if we go back, if somebody, where's the clicker? I want to go back a couple of slides and show you something just to, one more, okay. I want to get to the slide that shows, right there. What would happen if we wanted to do a true community engagement? We told the city, look, you pave a road into this site because you're going to take over the utilities anyway, and county or city, whoever, somebody do something about putting a light in or putting this as 3 lanes from a certain point. And there's your shelter that's training until there's a hurricane, and then it's not
I
training.
was
it's a
wondering about
shelter.
that too. I was going to ask if it would
It could
be hardened.
Because it's
any
got to
of
get
that.
built anyway, and for a few more bucks with somebody kicking in money, we could make it a hardened shelter, we could put air conditioning, it could be the special needs that we actually lack.
Yeah.
And it would be on school board property, so we're giving land and building a facility, and other entities are helping us with it. And that's,
Purpose.
that could be 10, it could be 20,000, you could put a kitchen in it that serves food and shelter use, and
What
when
size
it's,
grant is this that we're talking about?
I think it was 10 million. But I don't know if that's the actual, you shoot for that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's the grant that's coming in. So I don't know what they actually can get. I don't even know if it's been submitted. I just know that that's what they were targeting. And if they find somebody with it,
That'll be probably a discussion for later.
So I would like to leave that debt in the 5-year plan. It doesn't mean that we necessarily are going to use it, but if it's not there and we
We have no
decide to
flexibility,
move
yeah.
forward
it would
with
upset
putting
your 5-year plan.
MTC
You'd
and
have to
MTI,
resubmit it to the state.
we'd have to totally resubmit,
I
so.
understand that. Do we have a consensus? All right, you have a consensus.
Thank you. Sorry, sometimes it's just uncharted territory about how just to word it in terms of asking, so.
Well, and.
Okay, well, that's
these
all
are
I-
big decisions, so it requires a lot
Yeah.
of time.
Public comment, interview session.
Okay.
Yep, I'm good if you're good.
We're good. Is there any public comment? Seeing none. We're going to take a.
I'm looking at Teresa Bostonellis's face right now.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what, we probably should wait for
You
that.
wake her,
consensus
so.
until after we talk to her. 'Cause if we-
True.
She's the money person. Okay. Am I watching? There's a glare. What time do we have?
It is about 11 minutes till the top of the hour.
10:45? Okay, so we're having a recess at 10:45 a.m.
Did you see?
100% support.
Okay, we are resuming our meeting at 11:03, and now we will be discussing our budgets with Ms. Teresa Boston-Ellis and Ms. Latoya.
Madam Chair King, Vice Chair Cummings, board members, Attorney Gibbs, and Mrs. Martinez Lopez.
Good morning.
Good morning. Before we start with the other funds, I wanted to go over the questions that you posed to us last week. In some of the instances, it was quite easy to get some answers, and some of them we had to do a little digging. So we'll go one by one, and if this isn't adequate information, of course, we have next week, we'll come back to you for that as well. So behind your tab 7, we're going to start with where it says tab 7, question 4. Before I do that, I want to introduce or reintroduce some more folks that came to support us today. You all know Alice Posada, our Director of Finance. Our accountant for food service is, where did he go? Dan Temple. And then also we asked Susan Johnson to be with us today as well. So welcome. So tab 7, question 4. There was 2 questions that we're going to try to address. The first question was, how much is the foundation going to cost the district? Salary, benefits less take stock. And then with the salary, will the salary remain the same or increase for the foundation employees? So this first schedule at the top, it says 2019-20. The new employees, those are the 6 new employees that are coming from the non-MCPS to Marion County Public Schools. They total $264,221. The current employees, there are 2 of them now. That cost will be $149,886.44. So the new cost, the revised cost for 1920 for the foundation will be $414,107. The take stock contribution, if it lines up with what it has in the past, plus another miscellaneous reimbursement that they provide, is $167,891. So the total cost to the district would be $246,216. For the 18-19 year, as a comparison, the salaries in fringe that were paid by the district were $161,997. A portion of that was reimbursed by the Public Ed Foundation, $41,512.39. So in 18-19, the total cost to the district was $120,484. Also, salaries that were directly paid by the foundation totaled $177,145.61. And I believe that is the answer to the question that you asked. So it's comparing what we paid in 18-19 to what is proposed for the 19-20 year.
Okay. So we paid $124.84 last year. So I take that from the 246 to find my difference that we're paying.
No, this year, the district is proposed to pay $246,
Right, so
$216, and what you're saying is backing out the $120?
For that we paid last, to show the true difference.
A part of that $41,000 is a part of the $167, if that makes sense. They were using some of the take stock dollars to offset the cost in 18-19, $41,000 of that. And that was to cover a portion of the cost of the foundation director, as well as a portion of the cost of the clerical staff there. So I'm not sure that you can just take 246 less 120.
Or would it be 246 less 177 for a 69,000 difference?
Well, that's salary paid, that's them, that's part of their salary that they pay.
Right.
I'm talking like just cost
we don't
to
have to pay.
us.
So if we took the 264, 221, that's the new employee
Okay.
cost, and they're contributing the 167, 891. So that's what you would,
But then you gotta take the fringe, though.
Fringe is included in
It's
it.
just included in the
Including that.
264.
we've already voted on the staffing fund.
No, don't get worried. It's okay. Just trying to figure out what we got.
Okay, so 167,
It's about 100,000, a little less than
a little
100,000.
less than 100,000,
Okay. Just what I want to know.
about 96,000.
I think I remember hearing that number too.
Okay, the next question, it's entitled Tab 7, Question 5. I believe the question was, please provide a 5-year budget comparison, including actual and original budget. And it's a legal size sheet, and what we did is went back to the 14-15 year, and this is the general fund operating. And we are showing original budget, which is the adopted budget. It's not a revised budget that occurred during the year. So this is the original adopted budget by the board as compared to the actual expenditures in that same year. And we did that for 14-15, all the way through 18-19, and of course, overlaid the 19-20 budget as well.
You've always managed to leave money in the bank.
We do our very best, and also some of the funds that are categorical, we're required to carry them over to the next year's budget.
Right, plus maintaining at least that 4% reserve, which you somehow managed to maintain more than that, or 3%, yeah.
Yes,
Then, but 4 to 7 is the,
what the auditors would like.
that's what I was,
The creditors want double digit.
right, which helps our interest rates. So, yes, okay.
So the next question, tab 7, question 6. As you can see, we've worked with curriculum, and we're so appreciative of the digging they had to do because the current staff was not around back in the day. Based on what I read, and you can take a few minutes and read the response, the last time we had an elementary science textbook was 2011. And then a little bit further down, the last time we had an actual textbook for social studies was 2008. But in between those times, there was additional curriculum provided as support for all of our teachers in teaching those. So I thought this was a really good detail for Mrs. Lee. This is a new job for her. She's doing fantastic. She did a great job explaining that.
Yeah.
The next question, tab 7, question 7. There was a question about the periodicals increase, and this sort of goes with the textbook question. For the 18-19 year, we purchased Social Studies Weekly digital magazine for K-5, as well as online STEM scopes for science. So that represents what was in the budget for 18-19. Question 8 is where do we record contracted nursing services? In the 18-19 year, we had a contract with the Florida Department of Health for $558,000, and we have also budgeted the same amount for the 19-20 year. I think, Ms. Stacy, you had asked that question. The next question was asking about the retirement increase for our special risk, which is our police force. If you look at the bottom of that spreadsheet, it gives you a comparison cost of what it would have been if they were just our regular defined benefit class or investment class versus the special risk. The regular defined is 8.47%, whereas for special risk, it's 25.39. So the additional cost is approximately $60,000. I also want to bring to your attention, I mentioned to you that we do have a blended rate, and you can see on the schedule also that we look at all of our different employees, what plan they're in, the number of people in those plans. So when you combine all those different elements, we come up with a blended rate of 8.95% for retirement. And that's what the board contributes to FRS for our employees. But the question about the additional cost is around $60,000.
It seems worth it to me for what they're being asked to do. That's me.
Question 9, I guess it was 9B first? Yes, 9B is a diesel fuel history. We went back to 2014, and as you can see, our costs were $2.6 million in 14-15, and there was a sharp decrease in 15-16. So I went back and asked what happened, what was the average fuel cost, and staff was able to identify that we paid $3.30 for average price per gallon, and then in 15-16 it went down to $1.60. But as you can see, from 16-17, there's a increase every year, and it looks like we're paying probably about $200,000 additional for diesel fuel.
Diesel didn't go down like gasoline,
No, it didn't.
because my husband's got an F-350, and I kept saying, this is crazy, because
So
diesel
the
at
new
one time.
buses, they're not diesel, right? They're regular gas?
Mr.
At
Lupper?
least some,
We're buying our regular
Yes.
diesel.
Oh, they're diesel?
Regular diesel?
They're Diesel, and there are some gasoline that are being purchased, but mainly diesel.
Diesel's easier on an engine supposedly, but.
yeah,
it
they
is
run longer.
expensive.
We're hoping the price will go down. I think we're anticipating the buses to start showing up next 2-3 months.
Late September, yeah, late September, October.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we spread around where they're being purchased from so that we could get them sooner, so.
And aren't we supposed to have all of them by December?
Oh, we would like, we hope.
So you need to let us know so we can do a photo op with
Yes.
the board when they start rolling in.
We're excited, drivers are excited, everybody's excited, so we'll let you know.
We are.
Take one for a ride on the range.
Parents are gonna be excited that we got air conditioning and everything.
Yeah.
Not in all of them, but.
Well, but I mean, our new
Yes.
ones. I mean, well, but we're getting there.
Yes.
Absolutely. And question 10 sort of ties into that question. And you had asked the interest rate for the lease purchase of 150 buses, and it was 2.7789.
Way to negotiate.
Question 11, what was the unassigned fund balance amount and the percentage for the last 3 years? Let's see. Tried to show this as concise as possible. This is not the entire fund balance, this is just the unassigned. So this isn't the categoricals or the unspendables. So, as you can see in 15-16, the 3% amount was 9.3 million, and then the other unassigned was 6.1 million. So it was 15 million in the unassigned category, and our overall percentage for 15-16 was 4.99%. The 16-17 year, 15.9 million in total unassigned, and again, the percentage was a little over 5.1%. 17-18, 15.9 million, and our unassigned total percentage was a little under 5%, 4.96%. Currently, for the 18-19, we're showing $21.4 million, and our total unassigned of 6.55, but I just want to caution you, when we did tentative budget, we hadn't paid all the bills, so LaToya and I was just discussing when we're going to cut off so that we can bring the final to you. When we bring the final to you of September 10th, that number will be changed at that time.
That'll be lower.
We received a little more revenue, and we've got some more bills as well that
Okay.
have to be accrued into the 18-19 year. And then the 19-20 year, we are projecting a $17.9 million unassigned fund balance and a little over 5%, 5.36%.
Sounds good.
So again, that'll be impacting our final budget. Question 12 asked some information about art. I think we were having a discussion about the rise of expenditures as it relates to the income in the referendum fund. And there were several questions asked, and I'll just go through each column. We listed all the schools that were impacted. As you can see, the programs range from art, drama, theater, and then projected enrollment for the 1920 year is 2,964. We get this money, information from the curriculum. Yeah. And then the three next columns tell you what it would cost. So for allowing these programs to have $25, it would be $75,900. If we went down to 15, $46,260. And if we went down to 10, it would be $31,440. Our 18-19 enrollment was $3,582, and we provided $25 for each student. This was a new allocation, and it totaled $85,225.
Okay, I'd like to comment.
Ms. Stacy?
On an overall $600 million budget, I just cannot believe we can't find $75,000.
And as I stated before,
Student focused, I think we can find it.
the reason we were evaluating that is because we just realized that we have a lot of recurring costs in the referendum, meaning salaries and benefits, those things that are increasing, and it wasn't in line. So there was a discussion about what could we unfund in the 1920 year. And since we had just implemented that program, it was suggested that we could eliminate this cost. So it's not that we can't bring it back, I just wanted to explain to you why that happened. And that is something we need to pay close attention to, and the next slide will show you why. So,
we're expecting enrollment, the projected enrollment to go down this year.
in terms of the students that are participating in these programs.
I hear all about employees and I hear all about benefits. I want to hear about what we're giving the kids.
That's fine, Ms. Stacy. I was just trying to explain to you why that was looked at. There were also some other things that were unfunded as well. Portion of vocational was reduced, as well as, I think we have roving teachers. Those were eliminated. I believe there was either 4 or 5 of those. So these were adjustments that were made in order to stay ahead of or stay behind the revenue that we're receiving.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly in the projected enrollment. I see, like at Westport, rock band, 0, guitar, 0.
What happened, they are a part of the music and we should have been giving them an allocation out of the regular music allocation. And so we discovered that after the fact, that they were already counted in the music allocation.
Oh, okay, because I was about to be crushed, because I like going to those. I was like, wait a minute, what?
They're included in music.
Okay,
Right.
okay. Thank you.
Mrs. King, is there some recommendation, because we're trying to wrap things up in the budget?
I believe, well,
We can just
Are we
keep cutting
here-
out of the kids' pockets.
I don't think we should, that's what no, that's not a good thing. I don't think it needs to be cut from the kids. I mean, every time I'm seeing a cut, it's coming from the students, it's coming from the classrooms, it's coming from the schools, and I'm seeing other areas that are inflating. And I don't agree with cutting from our students, especially when a referendum was passed for the arts and the musics and the libraries and the physical educations and the vocational schools.
Don't take something that we've already given them, don't take it away.
Right. So, and that's something like in 4 years, if we don't have the money, well, then that's one thing.
worry about
But
it.
right now, we're getting that. So I think moving forward, we also need to be very cautious how we are spending this money, because there is no guarantee that there will be another referendum. And
If we don't spend the money on the kids and the people
Exactly.
sit in our savings and not at their kids, and they get upset about that.
So I have a question.
just doing what's
I
right.
know that the dollars, and I'm the one that raised this because I do have a concern, the referendum dollars do not begin to come in till November, is that correct?
The revenue from the local taxes.
Does not start coming in until November.
We keep in reserves to cover us, right?
Yes. And that's why we try to keep a reasonable reserve, so that it can cover those 3-4 months until we start receiving funds.
You have to cover the salaries for those 3 or 4 months. And each year, those salaries will increase, and we have to look to make sure that the referendum dollars are, I think the concern is that the referendum dollars are keeping up with the salaries and benefits increase. So that, and those employees that are funded by the referendum, they are owed that increase. So I want us to be sure that we understand the whole picture. I do want to be sure that the kids have something. And maybe we compromise and go to $15, because I don't want to, I'm just, Ms. Boston Ellis and I've sat down with her and had the conversation, so I now understand the reality of it.
Well, I understand the reality also, Ms. McCall, but I keep hearing all about salaries. If we didn't have students, we would not need the referendum. This is about students first.
And I want to see them get $25 per student.
$75,000 in a $600 million budget, I don't,
Well, and that's, as a board member, I'm like, we're close to $600 million. We're getting $20 million, right? Our referendum is
we don't have
increasing.
$75,000 for arts.
And then I'm like, but then we don't have the art, and we have less and less. And that,
I'm not arguing with you about that. I'm just saying the majority of those dollars cover the cost of salaries and benefits for the almost 400 people that are being charged.
Right, and we put, and I understand, we put project specialists, or whatever we call them, program specialists, and we put all these things in. Maybe we didn't need to put so many specialists in.
We didn't
We only
under
have one.
referendum.
That was to reduce class size.
just
That's
have
what
But I'm
that
those.
was.
talking, but we had like an arts
Teachers are for it,
project.
right? We do.
Yeah, we do. We have them.
We have,
Yeah, program specialists for something like the art.
But
Right.
they
But
have
that's
a very
okay.
important role.
But how many teachers, Teresa?
I can tell you, it's the next slide.
Like
If
Jan
you look-
Crowder, I think gets paid.
You look on the next long sheet.
Referendum, and that's
I love how these questions
I'm
are,
not arguing with
So
you.
the
I'm
next
going to have
slide.
something to say.
let's look.
you look at the next one, slide, it says tab 392, but it's question 13. That tells you for each year. So in the 16-17 year, our salaries and benefits were 12.8 million. We had 310 staff. Then the 17-18, we jumped up, almost 140. Predominantly, that is in the area of paras. 18-19, we're at 468. So what we tried to show you here is where we're in 18-19, and then 19-20, we're at $19.3 million for salaries and benefits.
But yet we cut 4 employees,
Um,
right? We had 468 employees for 18-19. We have 464. We have 4 less employees, but we made more money.
No, I'm talking about referendum.
This is how much it cost us in salaries and
Right.
benefits.
Yeah, but if you look at numbers,
I'm looking at the units. I'm looking
Yeah.
at numbers. Look at the 468.
No, I understand. I
We
understand.
cut 4 employees. We should be able to find $75,000 in that. I'm sorry that we,
But we gave them raises.
They had to get the raise.
They had to get the raises.
well, if we don't have kids and they all go to charter schools because we're not doing what we said we were going to do, then we won't need the people either.
Can I keep going?
Time to,
Okay,
So in the 1920 year, 19.3 million for 464. And then the 2021 year, I asked Thomas to reflect a 2% increase in salary and benefits, which may be a little too conservative, I don't know. So if you go through the end of the referendum, we'll be right at $20.4 million for just salary and benefits. We're getting about a million more every year if the property values continue to go up. We incorporated safe schools in the 1920 budget to the tune of 1.3 million.
if we're getting $1 million more, we should have more than 20 million in 22-23.
If we continue. If we continue with the same growth, I don't know that we will continue with 7% growth in our property values. None of us can predict that. But even one of the committee members pointed that out to me at our last ICROC meeting, saying that we need to be very careful, vigilant about our expenditures, getting ahead of the revenue that we're receiving.
But I don't think they were talking about student expenditures.
No, just in total, just in total. I'm not disputing anything you're saying, I'm just trying to give you the facts so that you can make the best decision. And if the decision is to add back the $25, we certainly will.
We read a little story at every board meeting about how we're student-focused. I'm going to live by it.
Well, and I
we'll figure
agree,
it out.
these teachers
I'm not reading the-
are
I'm
a
not-
part
don't
of
put things
why
for
our
me to read.
students are performing so well, as we've added all these teachers back. I want them to have the $25, but I also hear what Ms. Boston Ellis is saying. We made a commitment to school safety to use at least $1 million of that referendum for that. The salaries and benefits increase on an annual basis. And I'm not saying let's not do something, but I hear what she's saying, and I think we have to fiscally be responsible with this,
We can't get ahead of we can't
Correct.
spend money
that we don't have.
anticipated.
But see, I think that we're being penny wise and dollar foolish. The kids, this money goes directly to their program that affects them. That teachers have that little bit. Because if we don't do it, the teachers are gonna end up putting money in there that they need for different little programs. They're gonna be buying stuff that they need, because that's what they do. And,
Can we go in the middle? Can we get to a number in the middle, Teresa?
Pardon me?
Mr. What are your thoughts?
Census?
My first question is the amount of, that the funding referendum covers for school safety, from what I understood, that was undefined.
No, I think about 800, almost 900,000 of that is the additional cost for the SROs. So that contract jumped up. We're only receiving $2.7 million in our safe school allocation. So any cost over that, we moved it to referendum, and that was
See,
over.
and that's my concern. That was my concern in the beginning about adding school safety to the funding referendum, because.
Here we go.
Here we go. And now we're talking about reducing funding to our kids, when if it's mandated for us to provide all of the school safety equipment and SROs and everything that the state says we have to have, then we're being asked to balance it on the back of our kids, and it's. I think that's the frustration, yes. I do agree with Ms. Stacy on this one, because that really wasn't the spirit of the original referendum. So if we make it easy,
Ms. Thor's not finished.
this Nancy's not done talking.
But we're on the same,
I know, but we need to
we're
hear
speaking for one another here.
Okay, what she has to say, thank you.
If we continue to make it relatively easy, in relative terms, to cover our school safety expenses by taking out of the referendum, then we don't have anything to go to the legislature to say, look, we're taking money off the backs of kids, or it's getting to that point, because we want to maintain our great status financially, but at the same time, we have to do what's best for kids. We have to do what's best for kids. It's best for kids to have that $25, in my humble opinion.
And I don't disagree with that, but one of the reasons I really think the referendum passed for the second time, I think one of the overall reaching reasons is because we added school safety. Now, I'm not saying that it wouldn't have passed.
Right.
But I was the one out doing the
I know.
speaking.
Well,
and
we
I
all
know
did our
what
part.
I think it
those
helped
people were
increase
saying.
the percentage
It
of
helped
people
increase.
Yes, yes.
But I'm just saying, I don't want to spend money that we don't have.
Right, and it did give us some insurance in terms of securing the renewal of
And
the
we're
funding
able-
referendum, and it played well to the public, but I don't think the public wants us to
They do
not take care of kids
Correct.
because of safety, which is something the state is not fully funding. That's my point.
Ms. Stacy.
Okay, I'm
I
done.
don't think if we were out on the campaign trail for the referendum and said, we're gonna put this school safety money in here, and if we don't have enough, we'll just start taking from the kids. We'll start with art.
I did
I don't
not
think
say
it would have
that.
passed. I know it. I'm saying, because you didn't, we gave it to them last year. What's the first hit to add security to it? The art students, the first hit to this new referendum, because we gave it to them last year, and suddenly, because we added safety, we don't have money to do stuff for the kids.
She has a point.
First hit. Just what
If I
the people
can,
were
if I can
afraid
just
of.
make 2 points.
Okay,
The $25 came about in 1819.
that's
For
fine.
the first,
Typically, schools provide dollars from their school budget to all programs. I don't know how the principals allocate those dollars, but they typically provide those dollars. And if you go back, and I know you all remember, the gist of these dollars were to reestablish programs that had been adversely impacted by the recession. And that was our elementary art, the teachers, art, music, PE. But what we have done since then is we've enhanced all these programs. We gave $1 for every media, art, and music teacher times the number of students to upgrade their supplies. It was supposed to have been a one-time deal, but we've continued to do it every year.
But the reason
And then we started adding additional units. We added roving art and music teachers. We added PE techs to help the classes. So we've trying to do the right thing, and I'm not arguing with any of you about this. I'm just trying to give you the facts. So as we have added staff, there is a recurring cost for staff. The recurring cost of not only salary increases, but also benefits that we don't have control over, health, retirement, those things that we don't have control over. So the only thing that I'm saying is that we need to be mindful of how our expenditures are growing as it relates to the revenue that is coming in. But if it is the consensus for us to put the $25 back in, we will certainly do it.
It's just that we took it away the first year of the security. The reason we added it in was because property values were going up. We had more money coming in. So and when we first did the referendum, we didn't put that money in there. I was on the board. We started out real slow because we were just finishing a recession. We didn't have the property values. So as the property values increased, we gave something to the kids. So the art students got the benefit of some of the property increases last year. That was, so now, we're still property increasing, but we're gonna take away that. And I do understand that the referendum, of course, it became a jobs program also, because you gotta have the teachers. But if you don't have the students to do things for first, then you don't need the teachers. Students first, or don't ever give me that thing to read that we started the meetings at, because it's,
We try to get.
I'm dead serious.
Add it back.
Students first.
Well, I'm not sure yet because I'm not sure I have a consensus. Do I hear a consensus that we want to add it back, or do we just want to add if you look at the page before, we have the $15 or the $10 amounts? I don't.
And
is
I
any
start
of
to
those-
ask the question, what, does it have to be this amount? Can't we meet in the middle on this? Can't we go to
Well, I-
$20 and save some money for that?
Say 50 cent?
Right,
Sure.
well, if you look at that.
Yeah.
She got 25. I'm
Mrs.
sorry,
McCall,
20.
Mrs. McCall asked for 3 different scenarios.
Yes.
So there was the $25, the 15, and the 10. So she just wanted to see what the cost would be for anything. And you're correct, it's a nominal amount in terms of the overall budget, but this was one of the items that was looked at in terms of, what, if we needed to cut anything, what was it at, what could we unfund? Because this was something new that we had done.
And there
So-
did have to be cuts. I mean, there
They-
were
they
cuts
were
that had to be
Mm-hmm.
made. While we're talking about this too, is every position that is on this referendum, is it new? Like, when I look at the paras and I see 60 and then it's jumped up a lot, are those all brand-new positions? Or were they already in our school, we were absorbing it, and then we transferred that to the referendum? So all those are brand-new employees?
New units. Remember, we did putting paras in kindergarten, I believe? Dr. Mayer could probably speak to that, that those were new positions.
Okay, so how come I keep hearing about para cuts then? So where is that coming from? Because I keep hearing about, maybe not the kindergarten, but I keep hearing that there's paraprofessional cuts. So where are those cuts coming from then? That's
I
what,
wouldn't know that. I don't know if it's because of Title I funding or IDEA B funding. We use those funding sources as well to pay for paras. Especially,
So sometimes.
Para cuts or
sorry.
para moves?
I hear if they leave, then they're not replaced. So I think, I'm not sure what's
Well, it looks like
happening.
I guess I need to ask the question.
223.
How many pairs did we have in year 15, 16? That'll answer your question.
Because I think some of those were para moves that fell up under some of those Title I or IDA.
Did we shift them around?
We,
though?
we would have to get, we'd have to
16,
get.
17, we had 67 paras.
Can I have that sheet back?
17, 18, we went to 210.
See, what
Exactly.
she's asking is, did we absorb some?
That's what
from
I'm saying.
other- From,
Did we
from
absorb
Title
it?
I or any of, or any
Right,
of
because
those?
we had that
Said
money.
they're new paras,
I just
new
like-
positions. That's what she just said.
We'd have to ask that question to Employment Services.
Yeah.
But it was my understanding that these were new units to support. Now, I know that during that period of time, we were going away from an ESE para and we were going to a special needs para that might have affected or impacted on the general fund side or the IDEA B grant side. And then Title I also has paras. But we shouldn't have
Here's the
been.
question, here's my question. What were our para units in 15, 16, just district-wide? And what are our para units today, district-wide?
Okay. We can certainly ask them
Like,
that.
district-wide to
Plus the
include the
referendum.
referendum.
All funding.
I want to know
Okay.
paras before in 15, 16, and then paras now to add to this number.
Okay. We can certainly ask them for that information.
That's all
'cause-
paras. That's all
That's
paras.
everything. I want, not associated with the referendum and what we've got, and then I want everything we had in 15, 16 for paras.
Because what I think, oh, go ahead.
We will get that information. It was just brought to my attention that if a para was funded by Title I, and if the school decided that they wanted to use the dollars for something else, then that unit would go away, but the person would have a job in the regular
So we
general.
supplanted them, which we promised we wouldn't do. If we left the para there and it went under the referendum, you're saying?
No,
The IDA.
it could have gone to just general
It
fund.
didn't go to referendum.
Any, pardon me?
School-wide programs to get to choose what they want.
Yeah.
Their own school, what they need.
Okay.
I don't think we're supplanting, Ms. Stacy, but we will go and find out the information that you requested and bring that back next week.
Mr. and then we'll-
Yep. Here's what it looks like to me. It looks like maybe paras were cut from the district budget and then had to be absorbed by Title I or the schools or IDA in order to keep the paras. I'm also understanding that we were at one para for each kindergarten teacher, but as paras leave via attrition, that para will not be replaced, that over time, it will now move to one para for each two kindergarten teachers. And I would like to know if that's accurate.
Maybe we can ask Mrs. Dobbins to come
Yeah,
next
'cause these
week?
really aren't your questions.
Yes.
Right,
I
right.
could certainly go back and ask, but I would prefer them speak.
Because,
But
see,
Miss Boston
can I
Ellis is very
finish?
good at interpreting what we want.
Right.
So that's why we talk to her, because she knows what we want. That's why I like.
Well, and it's the funding referendum, and that's what you were talking about, but I think what I'm noticing is our paras being added to the funding referendum for the referendum to pay for instead of them continuing to be paid by Title I, IDEA B,
If that's the case, we're
district.
planted.
I don't know what,
We'll find out.
okay,
We're gonna find out.
Yeah.
Okay, I think
So I think we have a consensus that we want to do something, correct?
Yes, yes. What are we doing?
I think if it's affordable, I want to stay with the $25. I really do. I think that's the spirit of the referendum.
all right. You have a consensus.
Good. I mean, I'm the one that raised it because I wanted him to have it, but then I met with Ms. Boston Ellis and I understood the rationale behind it, so.
Yeah, and there is rationale behind
We
it,
have to
but,
be very careful.
But that's why we have these debates.
yes, yes. So that means,
And we all
though,
walk away friends.
So that's gonna be
Right.
$25
Yes.
this year.
Because
We're
just like
gonna,
last
we're
year.
gonna bring the $25
Okay.
back for the 19-20 budget.
But I think
It's gonna be
that
revisited.
every year, we need to
Every
revisit
year.
this. And those
We do.
teachers need to
Right.
understand that this will have to be revisited on an annual basis based on the property values
Right.
and what's coming in for the referendum.
But I'll bet everybody $10 here, it's not gonna break the bank, the sky's not gonna fall.
Yeah, I don't count money that I don't have.
Betcha, we got the money, it's there.
Well, we don't do that, but we do need to revisit it. I mean, you guys are paying attention to the news, I mean,
Yeah.
we could likely be headed
Another
toward a
recession,
recession, even
right.
though we've been saying it all year and we don't want to think.
And that's going to
but
affect
it-
the referendum, and our
Yeah.
teachers need to understand that.
We spent about an hour and a
Recession
half.
Just because one person got on TV and said we're going to have a recession.
No, I'm not
Or
saying that,
recession.
but I'm just saying you can't not plan for the rainy days or.
The,
when-
the good part is that these are not recurring items.
Yes,
The-
that's
My concern is our recurring items.
Right.
And that's the salaries and benefits. That's where my concern is. And you understand, during the budget process, it's like, oh, you know, if we hit what we budgeted, we're not gonna have very much money to start the next year, much less fund the existing units.
$70,000.
Yeah. I hear you, Miss Stacy, and
Kids,
it's back
How
in.
much is art worth to us? If it's not worth anything, then let's just don't have the referendum.
It's worth a lot. It's just those discussions that we have to understand what the rationale behind it was.
The rationale in my world is students.
Okay.
So it isn't all
It is,
about.
it is. And
Okay,
actually,
fine.
Ms. Boston Ellis is doing what she's just told to do. She's the middle person, so let's move forward. I think we have a consensus.
We have consensus that it's never personal towards you. It's just spirited discussion, and I continue to be a little bit concerned about vocational, too, because I think I heard a little bit of cut there. And again, spirit of the referendum, and I just want to make very sure that this was never designed to be a job program for adults. It was designed to restore what had been decimated, absolutely decimated. And we brought that back. We brought that back, and now that things are a little better, we're able to do some enhancements to make it even better. So that is the spirit of the whole referendum, and I just think we need to be very careful on the school security stuff, because the more we take on, the less we're going to get.
Let's
Well,
have a
Ms.
toast.
And-
It's all good.
Well, Ms. Boston Ellis actually said,
All
we have
good.
brought those units back, and we have not only brought them back, we've enhanced them the past few years. So we're doing what we're
Are you
supposed
talking
to
about
do.
vocation?
No,
Or-
the
Every
referendum,
I have
yes.
news for y'all. There's going to be a point where you're going to have to do something about your security. You're going to have to go to a sales tax or something to get security money, because this is never ending and it's just going to go up and up and up. This is a problem that has deep roots, and the referendum is not going to solve it all.
Every time I hear you talking about doing something new and the cost associated with it, it does give me some trepidation. Doesn't mean that it's not a good program or a great idea. It's that we've got to work within the budget that we have,
Right.
regardless.
That 75.9 is going to need to come from somewhere. That's
It
what I
comes
think.
from fund balance, the fund balance of referendum. Right.
It'll be okay.
I mean, you know, maybe it would be important to just have a discussion about the referendum, you know, at a later date, just what's in it. And we provide detailed information to the ICROC committee. And I think they've made suggestions, and I think one of their suggestions maybe a year ago is that we really need to be planning migrating all these units back into the general fund, because it is not a given at the end of 4 years. And we don't want to end up back in the same position we were. I was here, some of you were here. That was devastating.
I was here.
If we
Yes.
begin to do that, looking at next year and beginning to see what we can begin to do to move some of those back in so that it doesn't all happen at once. I mean, I don't know, but I agree with you. You know, our community said yes twice. Many communities have said yes 5 and 6 times, but that's not a guarantee, and we never want to be back in that position.
But I think it's also important that, like we're doing, we're looking to make sure that paras haven't been moved into the referendum from the general fund. So we want to make sure.
Right, like what,
that
right, because that's
or
not what it was
the IDA
for.
Or whatever we call it, all the initials, okay?
All right.
Okay, Ms.
Okay,
Thank you.
moving on. Now we'll talk about the remaining funds. So the, behind tab 4.
Okay,
So the only question we have is about the units to bring back to you next week then.
right,
Okay.
so far.
Yeah, I handed it to you.
So are we there? Page 3, behind tab 4. Basically, we're summarizing what, where's, Robert's left, and I'd asked him to stay with us for a while.
He got called out.
Okay, so basically, this is a summarization of the five-year plan, predicting about $203 million in revenue for the five-year plan, and then expenditures of $550.9 million. So we are at a five-year deficit of $353 million. So I believe he mentioned that was like 18% of the five-year plan is funded, and the rest is unfunded. And just to reiterate that, you can see that a large portion of the money is for remodeling and renovation, some maintenance, and some new construction, as he discussed with you today. So the items that he brought to you a week or so ago, we implemented them in the five-year plan as well as the capital plan for the 1920 year. Okay, he's back. So those items were included in not only the five-year plan, but also the 1920 plan. And you'll see as we go through. We did not have an increase in millage, so millage is the same, but with the 7.57% increase in property values, on slide 5, you can see that we are receiving $2.1 million additional dollars for the capital. That's the item that's circled in red. On the next slide, I'm just sharing with you if we had levied the full 2 mills, and this is just a snapshot from the 2012-13 year through 1920, if we had levied the full 2 mills instead of the current 1.5 mil, we lost $26.8 million. But if you go all the way back to the 2008-9 year, we have lost $89 million in just the millage, reduced down to 1.5 from 2 mills.
But the taxpayers picked up a mill with the referendum.
Yes. 6 in one, half a dozen the other. But each pot, we have restrictions. Exactly. So the next 4 pages, 7 through 10, represent all of the funded projects in the five-year plan. 67.2 million for 1920. In the 2021 year, it's 32.1 million. 21 through 22, it's 32.4 million. 22 through the 23rd year, 2023, 32.7 million, and 2023 through 2024, 33 million. So our total funded projects are 197.5 million. So this gives you just a snapshot of all the projects that are in the five-year plan. And on page 7, you'll see at the very top, that's that administrative complex that Robert was speaking about.
Where's that?
On page 7, the very top, just want you to see that we have included that in the five-year plan. On page 11 through, 11 through 15 are our unfunded projects in the five-year facilities work plan. And if you'll go to page 15, sometimes it's good for you just to flip through and look at these items, maybe not now at this very moment, but look and see the type of projects that are currently listed as unfunded. In the 1920 year, we're not funding 89.7 million. 2021, it's 43.9 million. 21-22, 38.3 million. 2023, 90.5 million. 23-24, 91.1 million. So 353 million of our five-year plan is unfunded.
Unfunded,
Unfunded.
No budget attached to it.
that says funded.
Says
Unfunded.
Unfunded in the
Look at the
red.
blue line at the bottom.
oh,
Yeah, they're
So-
got a typo.
Is it? Okay, okay,
Good catch.
okay. Help me now.
Go with
Y'all
red.
making me think I can't read or something.
Yes, you can.
I can read well.
Oh, yeah.
I saw that, but I'm looking at this. I'm looking at bottom lines. Okay.
I just saw the red and quit reading.
You're just a faster reader than the rest of us. We haven't got there yet.
I stopped at the red.
I did too. The red had my attention.
So did I.
Nothing else to talk
Thank
about.
you.
We stand corrected. We'll make that change.
Way to go.
So now we're just going to focus on the 1920 year. So that's the current budget year. Excluding fund balance, we have $31.8 million in revenue. And if you'll note on the local capital improvement fund, that 30 million, that's 95% of the funding is the 1.5 mil. So the largest part of the funding is the capital. The total expenditures are 67.1 million. 26% of that is for our buses and vehicles, 25% for remodeling and renovation, 16% for new construction. Maintenance is 9%, property casualty insurance is 2%, and our debt is 22%. Just to review our capital projects revenue sources, our beginning fund balance is $41.6 million. We have budgeted revenue of 31.8, of which you can see the majority of it is the local capital property taxes. And then our budgeted expenditures total 67.2 million. Again, the largest majority of that is projects that are funded by the local property taxes. Would bring out to your attention the lease purchase agreement for the $150 buses, 15 million. Our ending fund balance, I'll go back up to the CO and DS, the motor vehicle license revenue. Most of that money is going to be spent on the Dunellen High air handlers, the local property taxes. There's various projects, and Robert mentioned those a little bit earlier. And I bring to your attention also the ending fund balance. For impact fees, we have about $35,000, and we're looking for expenditures associated with Wyoming to maybe match them up so we can use those dollars up. And then sales tax, I think he mentioned it was $5 million. It's actually $6.1 million that is available for middle school DD or whatever school we decide. That falls within the range.
Councilman Ellis?
Yes.
Ask Mr. Knight. Mr. Knight, what would it cost to build a middle school, just off the top of your head?
Ballpark.
40 million?
Probably about 30 million.
30 million? Okay, thank you.
Really?
33, depending on the size.
I think we spent about 35 on Liberty, something like that.
Okay,
Yeah, it was 32.
Mhm.
32,
Yeah.
that was including land.
Land,
okay, thank you.
So counting land, though.
That was the entire cost.
Yeah, that's why I'm thinking,
30.
well, of course, with inflation, it could be about the same amount, just land already purchased.
Thank you.
Okay.
You gonna go finance it? You getting your money ready?
Just asking.
Not to beat a dead horse, just to show you that we have not received any PICO new construction since 2010, 11.
We're
and
going to
maybe
do our
even
cell phone
before that.
initiative, and it's going to
We're gonna
change.
get it on our cell
And then PICO maintenance, you can see that there were a few years that we did not receive it. But then it came back in 2014, 15. And for the 1920 year, basically there was $158 million appropriated for PICO maintenance. And as Robert stated, all of that went to the charter schools, which are our schools as well. There's a lot of different pieces that are involved in that. There was a push to share our millage dollars with charter schools, but it would not have been impactful to Marion County to be able to do that. But I think the larger voices, the larger school districts that have 20, 15, 25 charter schools, this was something that they could give up in order to keep their millage. So it's not just, they won't give us the millage, there's a lot of pieces that come into play. And I wanted to bring that to your attention, but we are not receiving any PICO maintenance. The impact fees, we just like to show you that it wasn't effective 10/1/2006, but have suspended it from 2011 through 2012. It seems like a lot of our growth is in the commercial area, not necessarily homes. And David provided some information for us to share with our credit rating agency on Tuesday, and he supported that emphasis, is that our growth is commercial, it's not really family. So I believe that's probably a part of the reason that we probably wouldn't generate that much money from impact fees. I don't know if you want to say anything else, Robert? He's gone, okay. David's gone. Sales tax, well, impact fees, we'll just move on, sales tax. On slide 22, I went back and looked, I believe someone had asked the question about what we had generated from sales tax collections. And if you look at the year it was implemented in 2004, that was a half a year, because sales tax is calendar year and we're in a fiscal year. So that first year, we only generated like 10.5 million, but you can see through the end of it, 12/31/2009, we actually had an average of about 22 million in each year. The remaining years were just basically interest costs that accrued on this balance. And again, this is showing you the schools that benefited by it: Horizon, Liberty Middle, Marion Oaks, Legacy, and we keep talking about that middle school DD, which was going to be a replacement for Lakewood Middle. Another thing to remember is that the economy tanked, so the funds that we're starting to get started going down. As you can see, in the 7-8 year, it went down about $3 million, and then the 8-9 year, it went down another $600,000-700,000. So
Did we do a half penny sales tax or a penny?
the half-cent sales tax. So right now, as I stated before, the fund balance is actually about $6.2 million, if you round. The next two slides are the current 1920 budget, and the yellow items are new. They are brand new to the 1920 plan, as well as new to the 5-year plan. And I think I mentioned the admin complex budgeted $1.9 million in the 1920 year. Bellevue Santos air handlers, a little under $500,000. The central warehouse new construction is about $300,000. And if you flip over, you'll see in the 1920 budget, there is MTI replacement school, a little under $1 million, and MTI remodel buildings 1, 3, 4, 6, and 14, $799,000. So those total $4.4 million in new projects. Any more questions on capital? Again, it was built based on the conversation that Robert had with you a couple of weeks ago. We do have some time, but we need to, I guess, finalize this before we bring the final budget to you on September 10th. So we will be waiting your decision for that. And if a decision hasn't been made by then, it can always be amended in. So if there are no more questions on capital projects, we'll move to debt. Our total budgeted revenue for debt is $15 million, and the majority of that comes from the capital project. We have to record our debt in a different fund, so it's just basically transferring the money from capital to the debt service fund. And then the expenditures are about $15 million, which include principal and interest payment, and a small amount of fees. Again, our financing sources for the debt service fund are state and local, some investment revenue. So This just illustrates the balance again, $15 million in revenue. And then if we further break it down, we do receive some funds from pari-mutuel racing. And then also, again, the transfers from capital. Looking at the expenditures, principal, interest, and small dues and fees, total $15 million. To look at our outstanding debt on page 29, Steve Barrett used to love to present to the board and say, you know, look down the end of the column that says outstanding principal. That is what we owe if we paid everything off at this very moment, $82.7 million. And that is in relationship to a total outstanding debt. That was the original issue. The first column was $128 million. But of course, because we have a payment plan for our borrowing, I'd like to bring your attention to the final payouts. And I went through and summarized the debt payoffs. I thought that was important for you to know. We will have $1 million paid off in debt this year that related to the prior bus lease purchase that we went into. In the 2021 year, about $49,000. In the 2023 year, $14.8 million. 25, $24.6 million. In the 2027 year, $33.4 million. 29, $18.2 million. And 31, $2.6 million. So I think that's important for us as we make plans to keep in mind the debt as we're paying it off. So the law requires us or limits us in terms of what we can borrow because we make those payments out of the capital. And our debt capacity is 3/4 of our capital millage. And for us, that would be $22.7 million. But our current debt capacity is 48.3. So we're well under that cap. But we also have to keep in mind that the more we spend on debt, the less is available to do other projects that are required. I think I've mentioned to you last week and a little bit today about credit ratings, which are very important. Every year we get something called a review or a surveillance, and it's usually Fitch or Moody's. And this is what they look at: economy and tax base of a community, finances, management, and the debt, pension. Most of these items we don't have control over, you know, in terms of our community. But they do look at those items in terms of what our ratings should be. So you might recall we were downgraded in 2014. At that time, we were like a AAA, we were AAA. And of course, it had to do with the economy and what was going on with school funding. Since then, our current rating for our general obligation debt is A1, and our COPs, those certificate of participation, we're like an A+.
How much of this represents COP on our debt?
If you flip back over to the outstanding debt page, about the third section down, our total debt was $100.2 million original issue. Our outstanding principal is $62.3 million, with estimated outstanding interest of 8.9, so $71.6 million is how much we have remaining debt. Thank you for that question, Ms. Stacy. So we met with them about an hour on Tuesday, Alice and LaToya and myself, and we had to glean and get information from David Herlihy about different forecasting. We had to get information from the property appraiser. They're really interested in this community because it does impact what our rating will be. As I always state, the credit rating goes into what our long-term borrowing will be. So that's why it's important for us to have a good credit rating. We will hear from them, I believe Thursday they said they would send us a draft, and if we have any corrections to it, and they may issue the report either Friday or Monday, and we'll be happy to share that with you via email. We're hoping for positives. Most school districts are around AA, that AA3, which is across the country, and that's where we were prior to 2015. So we'd like to think, based on the economy of our community, and we talked a lot about the CEP. Mark even provided the presentation that they did last month or 2 months ago about where our county is going, and we shared that with the credit rating agency. I thought that was very positive, and we wanted to appreciate Mark out loud for providing that
The
to
state of
us.
Florida, wasn't Marion County one of the hardest hit areas during the Depression?
Oh, yes.
So it would explain us the drop, because it was the hardest hit.
Fort Myers, too.
In Florida.
But in Florida, we were very hard hit in Marion County by that recession or depression, I think it was.
And we feel very protective of our community and our school district. I feel like sometimes we're lawyers trying to represent Marion County and put our district in the best light possible. So it was exciting to be able to share all the growth that's going on in our community. So if there are no questions on debt, any more questions, we'll move on to the next fund, which is food service. And I didn't mention Ms. Johnson. She's probably hiding back there. We all know Ms. Johnson, who came into this district and just really has done marvelous work in revamping our programs, and we're very proud that she's a part of business services. You may be aware that we have a program called Community Eligibility, known as CEP, and she went out after this program, and what it does is allow our district to serve free meals to all students in elementary and Fort McCoy and Hillcrest. So I think that is an awesome thing to have for our students. Also, there is a USDA Provision 2 breakfast, and that operates in our middle and high schools. And she's very well tied into making sure that our students have the best possible healthy meals. They might not appreciate them right now, but they will later on.
We're lucky to have a Southern cook in this position. I'm glad nobody from the north came down here today.
So we're very proud of what they have done to provide free or reduced meals for our students.
Wyoming has good food.
You know, these funds are restricted, and when you get money from the federal government, there's a lot of restrictions to it, and I think she does a wonderful job making sure that we're following all the regulations and rules that are required. Their budget is $32.5 million. 92% of those funds come from federal through the state. So that's where the majority of our funding comes from, and there is local revenue of $2.1 million. It's about 7%. So the majority of the funds that we receive are local and federal. They did have a beginning fund balance of $9.7 million, and their expenditures, salary and benefits, 39%. Another large category is where it says materials and supplies. That's where food is recorded based on the Red Book. It says food is a supply. We won't argue with that, but that's where food is recorded. And energy expenditures, about $549. You may not be aware that they do pay a portion of our electricity and trash based on the square footage in the cafeterias. So they do provide that. 6% for capital outlay. So again, the majority of the funds are on our salary and benefits and the food. At the end of the 1920 year, they are projecting ending fund balance of $9.5 million, which, as I stated before, is restricted dollars. To some people, this graph might look a little strange, but what we're trying to show here is that their operational dollars are, the expenditures are exceeding the revenue, and that's a good thing, because you may be aware that we have been in a position of having excess fund balance. So we like to see that this operational income continues to, the loss continues to show until we get to a certain point. I think they have been very frugal in looking at things they can purchase, such as replacing equipment, modernizing our cafeterias. You've probably seen some of the work that's been done. And again, we're looking to reduce that excess. Go to slide 35. The only thing that I bring your attention to is the federal revenue. There's a change from budget to budget, an increase of, our projected increase of $1.4 million. When I spoke with Ms. Johnson about that, she said the majority of that is due to including breakfast, more breakfast meals for students, and then also we're getting a increase in our rate of about 10 cents for each free meal. And I think on slide 36, the first two items just are reiterating the same changes and why. On slide 37, our state, we do receive a supplement for breakfast and lunch from the state, and that's just based on the participation. I don't know if that number has gone down from year to year, Ms. Johnson, or is it about the same every year? About the same? About the same. Okay. On slide 38, I just bring to your attention the account 3451 and 3454. There is showing a reduction, and the assumption is we will have more students moving from paying for lunch or a la carte items to going to the full lunch.
Will that help Mr. James' problem with the pizza?
That's right. Miss Stacy, he would appreciate that.
That's an internal.
Yes.
They know.
They heard it for years.
Yes, the Gatorade,
And the water.
and the water, right.
But the pizza was the big one.
Keep going. Then, on the other financing sources, just to remind you that we have to budget for Camp K. We have to transfer funds to food service to cover the amount that is not covered by the summer feeding program. They're a little different. So let's look at salaries and expenditures. We have a slight increase in salaries for administration, as well as, a reduction, and then increase in salaries for other support personnel, and that's basically your managers, cafeteria workers. And we do have a one-pager that Ms. Johnson created. We'll get to that in a minute, I think. Purchase services. Again, I want to bring to your attention that the food service program does reimburse the district for a portion of the garbage, water, and sewage, about $400,000. And then for our energy, there's the electricity, $510,000. Materials and supplies, again, I'll point out to you the 5,700 object is food. So we are spending about $13.8 million on food, and then we also receive commodities valued at a little under $500,000. In the area of capital, when I sat down with Ms. Johnson, we looked at the Object 6410, and I asked her what happened. She had a really good explanation. The federal regulations are very hard now, or they're looking at all the items that are being bid for food service. So they had to actually turn in all of their bid documents to the feds for them to evaluate. So we had to slow down purchasing anything until those plans were approved. And so that's why you see we only spent $275,000 in 18-19. She's really excited because we do have some combi ovens that need to be replaced and some kitchen equipment. I also want to point out that she is supporting the building of the North Marion High School in terms of food service dollars, and that's also recorded in that 6410. Another challenge that they faced in the 18-19 year was substitutes. We've gone through 2 vendors, and I believe they finally found a really good vendor. During 18-19, they had to move a lot of staff around to support when our workers were out on whatever leave. So they were very creative in moving staff around to make sure that we had met the needs of the school cafeterias. So hopefully we'll be back up to speed on those items soon. There is a one-pager in there, and you can read that later, and it gives you a lot of information on the number of meals that are served, how many of our kids are on free and reduced lunch, a lot of detail about the program. So whenever you're out in the community, I think it's important for folks to know these kinds of things.
So our free and reduced number has gone down, because it used to be in the 70s, right, Ms. Johnson?
It was in the 70s during the year of the hurricane because of parents who went to get support.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Good. You want?
Oh, stay.
Okay.
Good morning. During the year of the hurricane, we had a number of families that actually got support through the federal government through what we call the SNAP program when they replaced food. And if you applied for support through the federal government at that time, your name automatically got placed on our list for free and reduced. So those kids, any parent that participates in the SNAP program, that their names go automatically to the federal government, and we get a list from the state of who those families are. So our percentage at that time did go up to about 70-something%. That happened across the state because of the hurricane. But typically, our average is about 67 to 68%.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you. And are the parents filling it out like they used to now that there's free and reduced anyway? I mean, are you getting the same applications?
We do get applications because we still have our kids who are in middle school and high school who need those resources.
You don't get all those elementary anymore.
We don't, but we do. About 60% of our families qualify for meals without an application. That's the economic situation that we are in this district. So parents who qualify for different programs, federal programs, automatically qualify for free and reduced.
There were some parents that used to get it, didn't they, years ago, because they weren't on federal programs, and so you got a better picture. But I understood it was really hard to get the real picture of poverty now, such that because the parents don't have to fill that out in elementary school anymore, so you really don't know.
Well, again, because we have a,
Parents that aren't automatically in federal
Right.
programs and stuff, because there were some that got it that really weren't in other programs.
Right.
Because of their family size. and that
right,
sort of thing.
and that's why we've only limited our CEP program to our elementary students.
I got a question. So I just heard something that I don't think I knew. So you said if a person gets any type of federal type of assistance, they don't have to do the application?
They don't have to do the application.
Oh, wow.
Yes, there are a number of programs. So I can get you a complete list, because I don't want to misquote.
I wouldn't ask that. But I thought every person had to apply. That's the way it used to be.
Used to be.
It used to
Everybody had to apply.
Yeah, we have, there's something called direct certification.
Okay.
So you
So
have-
when they apply for one service through the government,
Yes.
they automatically
Right.
get it.
The state of Florida has developed a program that will automatically send us, and we upload the names of our students, identification information of our students into this program, and they do a 5-level cross match. So we get that information automatically of those kids or those families that qualify for programs.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
But see, if we weren't doing that, we really wouldn't know, because so many children don't have to apply anymore for the free and reduced. So we wouldn't really, if it weren't for that, we really wouldn't even know what our percentage was, since they get the free and reduced anyway, because our elementary schools just all get it.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Oh, let me say this before you sit down. Oh, why are you going to sit down? Keep walking, keep walking. Keep walking. I had the pleasure, Tuesday, to eat some lunch, a school lunch, at Marion Oaks Elementary. It was good. It was taco salad, taco nacho day. It was good.
Taco Tuesday.
Yeah, yeah. So kudos for that. It's lunchtime now. Let's think about food now.
Get you thinking about it.
Right, we've been talking about food a lot. As you can see, we're projecting our ending fund balance to be well below, I guess, the limit for the excess funds calculation. And we'll be happy about that, because we don't want to break that rule. The next fund is a special revenue fund, other, and that's where predominantly where we record all of our grants, our federal, state, and local grants. We have to keep in mind they're supposed to supplement what we do as a school district, not supplant. As Ms. Stacy mentioned, we should be adding to the programs that we have, not taking the place of. So 88% of our revenue comes from federal sources, 2.2 million local, and about 3 million from the state. There is no fund balance in special revenue. The revenue generated, you must spend. If you don't, it gets rolled over to the next year as long as you meet the criteria for that carryover amount. Of our expenditures, 66% or 28 million is for salaries and benefits. We have materials and supplies, about 6%. And then purchase services, about 12%. That's your consultants and those type of expenditures. And then 4.3% for capital outlay. Here's a picture of the historical trend of the federal grants, federal, state, and local grants. We did dip a little in the 2016-17 year to 32.8 million, but rebounded in the 17-18 and 18-19 year. The 17-18 year, we had additional schools in the 21st Century grants, Title IV, and then also the SIG4 and the UNICIG grants are responsible for those, that increase of about $3 million. And then for the 18-19 year, the SIG4, UNICIG, and the School of Hope accounted for that increase. Here's a picture for the next 2 pages of all the different types of grants that we have. Again, supplementing the instruction that we have. You can see for what we call 4200 fund, it's about almost $41 million. And also included in this is our Pell Grants, and that's financial aid for the Marion Technical School, 1.5 million. And then we have some miscellaneous grants, the STEM Fair, the greenhouses, and then also there's a wellness grant and tobacco cessation. So those are pretty much our local type grants, and they total a little under 700,000. So total grants are 42.8 million. And that's the next 2 slides, or just go to 54, slide 54. That is, again, the Pell Grant used for the MTC program. On slide 55, I would just note that there are changes from the actual to tentative, pretty large changes. The 3225 is the teacher training, I think that's Title II, 1.1 million. Again, if the money isn't spent, it's rolled over and they incorporate it in their next year's budget. The next item is the IDEA B, 1.3 million, 2.2 million for elementary secondary ed, which is predominantly Title I. And then, of course, the 21st Century grant is showing a reduction of 1.1 million. And the answer to that question is because we have not met the requirements of average attendance, our grants are going to be reduced. And this is basically the 21st century is the after-school programs that are at various schools. On slide 56, the $1 million for 1920 represent that School of Hope grant that is at Bellevue Santos. Slide 57, we do have a literacy grant for the 18-19 actual year. I believe this was program income that had to be recognized. The salaries and benefits slide indicate an increase of $1.1 million from budget to budget of our other certified instructions and a reduction in other support personnel of a little less than $400,000. There was a growth in units in Title I and IDEA B, and a reduction in units in the 1600 object for Title I and IDEA B pre-K. Purchase services, as I stated before, is consultants and contractor services. The rentals, which is a fairly large number, includes licenses and online subscriptions. You can just keep going all the way to 62. On slide 62, capital, that's a $1.4 million expenditure for the 1920 year, which is pretty much the same as 1819. And most of that is laptops, desk chairs. On 6500, where you see motor vehicles, this is a used semi-truck for CDL out of the Perkins grant. Other expenses, under 7,500, other personnel services, this represents stipends and sub-costs. And the 7,900, that is our indirect costs that the grants are charged. So the general fund can administer the programs like payroll and purchasing, those kinds of things. So a percentage is calculated, and we're allowed to charge the grants and administrative costs and indirect costs. And so that $1.8 million is transferred over to the general fund. And then also the 1.5 million for Pell Grants. That's where that expenditure is recorded. Any questions on the grants? Everybody's quiet now.
I have a question. Did we reapply for the homeless grant? Have we gotten the homeless grant back? Did we reapply for that?
We did, and that's one of those ones that's kind of stuck out
Okay.
there.
All right, so we did reapply for it.
Renee took care of it, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
The last fund is the internal service fund, and that's where we record property, casualty, insurance, workers' comp, all the things that are important when you really need them. So we have $4.6 million in revenue and about $4.8 million in expenditures. Most of the expenditures relate to things like our premium payments, and then also we pay claims out of this fund. And this is just a history of the internal service expenditures. We could spend a lot of time talking about this, but I'll just bring to your attention that because of an actuarial study, we were able to lower what our estimated claims liability is. It's sort of like how much money you have to keep reserved in case all of your claims came and when they were due. When we were able, based on the actuarial study, to reduce that by $281,000. So that program is operational and running very well. That's where we pay our workers' comp claims out of that as well. You'll see items from time to time about closing out those cases, and that's where those items are paid out of. And that is the end of our story, unless you have additional questions. We appreciate your interest and time.
I just want to say, Ms. Boston-Ellis, you do such a fabulous job of putting this all together for us, and it's very, you and your staff, it's really easy to read, and it's really easy to figure out what's going on. And, you know, after you look at it, if we have questions, it's easy. You're always so available, so thank you.
She knows ahead of time what our questions are gonna be.
Usually she does.
She always knows my questions ahead of time.
Well, can you give me some lottery numbers? That good. Thank
She's
you.
a mind
Thank
reader, we
you.
better be
She
afraid
is a
of
mind
her.
reader.
Thank you.
I think we just work hard to present the facts to you, and we appreciate all the compliments. But, you know, again, it's at your pleasure, and we will make adjustments in according to what you requested. But we really would like to get going on that final,
I'm good.
we'd like to get going on
I think
that.
we headed in the right direction.
We heard you loud and clear, and thank you.
And thank you for bringing the facts to us. And sometimes it's, rather than skirting around issues, you just come out and just tell us how it is. And as a board member, I appreciate that also.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, the chair recognizes the board attorney, Paul Gibbs.
You want to skip the rest of the agenda?
Was there something else?
Board
Oh.
concerns?
Oh, board concerns, I'm sorry. I was going to come back to that. All right, Beth, do you have any board concerns?
No, just, I emailed Ginger Bryant that we'll all be there, and she just asked us to come hungry and wear our name badges. So she has our numbers. So no, I don't have anything else.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Stacy? Mr. R?
Nope.
Mr. Cummings? I have nothing. Okay. Mr. Gibbs, did you have anything? Okay.
Executive session.
All right, now I recognize our attorney, Paul Gibbs.
Good afternoon, board members. I am notifying you that advice is needed regarding the IUPAT negotiations pursuant to Section 447.605 Sub 1 Florida statutes. Mr. Leppert has requested an executive session. As required by the statute, only the negotiating teams, board members, and legal counsel can be present.
We acknowledge your request. The terms appear to be in compliance with the Florida statutes. Board members, you have heard our attorney's request. As chair, I announce an executive session. The statute states that I must also announce the commencement of the session, the estimated length of the session, and the names of the persons attending. The session will commence as soon as the room is cleared, following a 5-minute recess to clear the room. It will last approximately 1 hour. For the record, the names of the persons attending are Kelly King, Eric Cummings, Nancy Stacy, Nancy Thrower, Beth McCall, Superintendent Heidi Mayer, School Board Attorney Paul Gibbs, Philip Leppert, and Teresa Boston Ellis. I declare a brief recess to be followed by an executive session, and we are recessing at 12:35.